It's a good song. I really like that song,
I need to know whether you can hear Taliesin's improvised theme song that was just accompanying our amazing intro by Caleb. Because that was wonderful.
That was sponsored by coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Welcome to the Wednesday Club.
I thought you were going to say
I don't
welcome
know
to
which one's
coffee.
my camera. I'm thinking it's you. Yes, great. Welcome to the Wednesday Club. I'm Amy Dallen. This is Taliesin Jaffe. This is Matt Key, as usual.
Hi.
And today, very special guest.
May I give you a little
Yes,
cake?
I have
Little
my...
cake. Little cake.
We shoot a fan at you so that you look even more super.
It works really well.
That is the face.
It zips into a hood.
It zips into a hood, but it unzips into a cape.
That is the face of a girl who saw the Supergirl movie very young, and it got in you.
I feel like we've talked about this, so you might be
know.
cheating
I
on
have Jody
that
spoilers.
info. Yeah.
We were discussing our favorite Supergirl costumes, like what iteration, and I'm very impressed that like you're a headband and badge fan.
It was because of the Which Way book, which I still have a copy of.
So for those in our audience who might not know you, even though they've been talking to you in chat the last couple weeks because you're the best, tell us a little about yourself, Jody Hauser.
I'm Jody Hauser. I can frequently be found in the Wednesday Club chat. I also write...
And that's your only claim to fame,
That's
right?
my only claim to fame. I also write comic books, including Faith, which just got nominated for Eisner for Best New Series.
Yay.
And it only took
blocked your
getting
face.
a
I'm
nomination
sorry.
for the most prestigious award in comics to garner a guest spot on the show.
That's
how
we do it.
elite they are.
That's pretty fair, actually.
Yeah. So
But-
We would not have you on otherwise.
You're also not busy at all with other comics work.
yeah, I'm also writing Mother Panic. They're part of the Young Animal line at DC. Rogue One for Marvel.
The official Rogue One adaptation. Jody
Yes.
is adding things to Star Wars.
Yes.
I'm getting mine signed
I
today.
basically get to write Star Wars fanfic, and then Lucasfilm approves it as canon. So that's kind of like,
That is possibly literally living the dream.
yeah, it's weird though. Like in a way that the other licensed stuff I worked on didn't feel weird.
I would take the possibly out of that and say that is literally living the dream.
But,
That is someone's
your first
dream
Marvel
being
work
lived.
was Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Yes.
So you didn't start small.
Well, it was it was a 9-page story. So if
great
you
Still,
that sort of, and it was about friendship, and it was in the anti-bullying anthology that they did. Avengers No More
Gamora in a
Bullying.
hoodie, and I'll never forget it.
No, it was
No,
Angela.
Angela in a hoodie.
Because that was at the time when Angela was running around with the Guardians, and I was like, can I put her in the story? Because it was supposed to fit in canon anyway. Can I put her in so there's not just like one woman on the team? And they're like, sure. So like literally the second panel is Angela and Gamora talking about ordering a meat platter at what I termed Space TGI Fridays. So, and they're all wearing like these random like
They're in disguise,
space
right?
tourist stuff. So, and my favorite, and I can't take credit
I
for
Heart
this.
Xandar.
Well, no,
I
actually,
do heart
Star-Lord is wearing an I'm Not Daredevil shirt. And I can't take credit for that. That was my
amazing.
editor's suggestion. And also, Tana Ford, who was the artist, she drew Drax with just like this little teeny bowler hat perched on the side of his head, and that was his costume. And Gamora was not wearing anything because she rightfully thought it was ridiculous.
She was wearing clothes.
She wasn't wearing any.
She wasn't a nude tourist.
Well, to be fair, that is a character that used to belong to what I used to call when I was a teenager. The I have figured out how to keep a very little clothing together with a tiny skull class club,
Yeah.
which is a club.
Yeah.
A lot of
There's
people.
also Mystique.
There's someone
Yeah,
who's
there's
making
Mystique,
tiny
there's-
skulls and saying this is all you need, and I want to find this.
Is
this person in the Marvel universe.
Vampirella in that club?
Vampirella. There was. I don't think she was a tiny skull.
She just has a collar.
Mystique had the tiny.
Yeah, but no,
Yeah.
Vampirella I think just has the white collar.
No, she
I'm
just
torn
has the
between
collar.
how monumentally dumb that is and wanting to read the short story about the person who made the Etsy store with like the world's
tiny
greatest
s-
fastener and became like a titan of her industry because she was just like, look, I know y'all need this.
This is a thing.
I've got it. Like,
And what other designs
Superhero
does this
supply.
Etsy store have? Like, are they all just skulls, or do they
No,
have like other
she makes the
designs?
half cowls.
I think it's like it's
She makes half
Alicia
cowls.
Masters is like, just I gotta move these things. Come on, people. This was a bad call. Boy, we are making some comic book in jokes right
Wow,
now.
Alicia
So
Masters.
sorry.
There was that-
Well played, sir. Well played.
there was that issue where I think the former hero Shamrock like is a hairstylist now and like ends up cutting hair for a bunch of different heroes. It was great.
I love that kind of thing. And I'd like to think maybe there's a planet where they're just harvesting all these tiny aliens to use as skulls.
I want to read the story of the Age of Apocalypse hairdresser.
Oh my God.
Because they had their work cut out for them.
No,
Yes.
that's
Strong looks.
Yes.
From the Age of Apocalypse crew, as one might
everybody joins a metal band. It's kind of
Yes.
It's a lot of hairspray.
Where the women have short hair and the men have long hair.
say. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
with a stripe. Let's add a stripe to it.
Oh, that's so true, and I've never thought about it. That was their formula for like, it's different. Jean's hair is short. Cyclops' is long.
More ponytail, more
Blown
stripe.
my mind. But speaking
That's why
of
I'm here.
amazing accomplishments, we are here because we've been wanting to have you on the show forever, but this seemed like a perfect opportunity because
But we couldn't have you on
last
until you got
week-
the Eisner.
I
Yeah.
know, like, I
As-
just wasn't cool enough,
as
guys.
you all know.
I'm really
Nowhere
sorry.
Last week
I did this for you guys.
Thank you. I always suspected that your incredible drive was really just so that I would have a more impressive friend to brag about, like
Yeah.
year on year.
Well, you're internet sensation Amy Dallen. I have to be worthy of your friendship.
Jody's the worst.
I've been
like
calling her
on
that for
record
5 years.
for so long, and I was always like, ha,
But it's
ha,
also
that's very
true.
funny. And
It is
like,
true. You are a sensation on the
You're,
internet.
you're the worst. You get an Eisner Award for being the worst.
I will gladly accept that award.
I feel Will would approve.
Yes. Backstory. Jody's also amazing, and I believe you've spoken publicly about this. Shops at our store.
Yes, I've been
House of
shopping
Secrets.
at House of Secrets for over 10 years now, so longer than Amy has been working there.
Is
Not a lot of
is that
people
the
in that
is that the
category.
favorite comic shop referenced in Faith?
That is the comic shop
assumed.
referenced in
I
Faith.
assumed.
Faith
Oh, that's right.
talks about she doesn't want to leave
Shop in
LA
Burbank.
because she just found this great shop in Burbank.
It's fine.
And I actually wrote, I think, a lot of that issue in the store because sometimes I just like go pick up my comics and then camp out on the couch
That
for a
is a
couple
comfy
hours
couch
and
they
write.
have in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have trouble getting out of the couch then, which is actually keeps me in place to get
Yeah.
writing done. That's actually how I write. Is
You're
like
organic
this.
because you're like, I'm ready to die. I can't leave. Oh well. 3 more pages.
I like how both of you write with your
Yeah.
You're almost
This
like
is how I
Tyrannosauruses
write.
when you type.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the Velociraptor novelist.
Yeah.
So guys,
I want to read that book.
I know.
The Velociraptor
The
novelist.
novelist.
Last Arc novelist. Probably
Burning
brought to you
Man.
by
We'll
Ryan
have that
Hart.
conversation.
Yes, we will.
That's personal, but yeah, it's a thing we can't talk about yet.
Yeah.
But it's,
Taliesin and I go to Burning Man
we go to
together.
Burning Man together.
I
It's a
just
thing.
need to know how this relates to the Velociraptor novelist.
We'll have photos after Burning Man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Come September.
Come September, there will be a.
So what's an Eisner Award? Is the thing. What's so exciting about this? I'll answer myself because
I
I,
was gonna say.
printed out all this stuff and that was my plan. The Eisner Awards are the preeminent comic book awards, a la the Oscars or the Tonys or the Grammys. They have been going, I believe this will be the 29th year of the
so.
Eisner Awards being handed out. They are one of several industry awards, but they are generally sort of the most prestigious, and the winners are handed out in a ceremony every year at the San Diego Comic-Con.
That's on. Is that always on the Friday night of Comic-Con?
Last at least 5 years
far as
that
I
I've been
remember.
going, it has been on Friday night. I don't know if that's been the case.
That
every
is
year
good to
forever.
know. Because unlike some people here, I've never been to the Eisner Awards.
I am
Oh.
so excited.
this will be my
believe,
first-
I believe as a nominee, you get a meal.
You get to
And
sit at the VIP
You get to
tables.
sit at the VIP tables and get a meal.
I get food at Comic Con.
They're
You
gonna
get
feed
food.
you.
This
Yeah.
is one of the things
I'm
I
just
love about
saying.
people who work in comic books is the notion of a free meal.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
get them to do almost anything.
Fun fact:
It's amazing.
most people in comics assume that they will be homeless tomorrow.
Yeah.
There was one of
I'm not.
No,
I'm
you're not
not
kidding.
actually.
a moment I'll never forget is going to the Eisners one year. There is a special award given out every year to comic book stores. It's the Will Eisner Spirit of Retailing, like an exemplary store that does a lot of community activities and sort of like you can. We've been nominated a couple times,
Aw.
but like it's really nice to watch. Stores all over the world get entered, and one year. The award was announced, and there was nobody there to pick it up, and somebody sort of went up and explained that the gentleman whose store had won the award could not afford to attend Comic-Con. And it was just like, you are being honored as exemplary in your field, but comics are a tough business. And that was when, like, the gentleman I was sitting
Here
with
to
leaned
accept the
over
award
and
are
said,
two crickets.
what
Yeah.
I now realize is like a very famous, originally uttered by Kirby comic book line, comics will break your heart.
Well, actually, a couple years ago, because anyone who has attended San Diego Comic Con knows how hard it is to get a hotel room. And a couple years ago, I ended up rooming with Faith Erin Hicks because she was nominated for 2 Eisners and could not get a hotel room, so she just wasn't going to go. And that happened to be the year me and my group of friends had like extra hotel rooms, and I somehow had like a room by myself. And I was like, please come to the Eisners, Faith Erin Hicks, and also please help me pay for my hotel room because they're very expensive.
A
Yeah,
mutually
they are.
beneficial
And she
arrangement.
won one of the Eisners she was nominated for, and I got to hold it. So
Aw.
that was cool.
Never give it back.
I gave it back. I gave it back. I'm nice.
But did
They
she-
were my
Yeah,
ride
you
back to
start going
LA
mental.
from San Diego, so I did have to give it.
That's a.
Did she sleep with it? Because that's what I would do if I ever won. I would just
No,
go
it was
to
like
sleep with
sitting on the table though in the.
We
hotel
would do a
room,
whole
so.
photo shoot with you if you wanted. It would be
as a
magical.
velociraptor novelist.
No, like
holding the
you would
Eisner?
go to sleep with it. We would do a photo shoot of you waking up in the morning, and you would make it an omelet, and you would split an omelet together.
Well, see, now I want to win
yeah.
just so this
Go out
happens.
for brunch. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Also, I would
want
like
to do
to-
a photo shoot with your Eisner. If
Yes.
you
We'll do it.
Well, and I know it's not just you. I know it's the whole team who worked
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Faith,
yeah,
and
yeah. It's
I
the
know
book
we're-
that's nominated rather than just me.
I
So.
know we're pouring on you, but you're here.
So
to
in that
focus.
sense, we will go ahead and start calling out some of these. The way Eisner nominations work is that they've been administered by the same lady since 1990, actually, Jackie
Oh, wow.
Estrada, who's just a face I'm starting to know from going every year now, and like I think she just sort of quietly makes the whole thing happen. So she puts together, I assume with help, a one thing that distinguishes the Eisners from other industry awards is that the nominations are created by a small sort of committee that's different every year. It's usually a mix of professionals from different areas of the field. This year, I think it was like there was a retailer, there was a librarian, there was an academic, there was a woman who writes about comics online who comes from sort of like worked in marketing in comics for a long time. There was someone who's on the like board of directors for Comic-Con. So there were 5 or 6 people who were sort of this year's nominating committee. And the companies will, I believe, generally send out sort of their like top 5 things they'd like to be considered in each category. Although you also, as a creator, can submit, I think, yourself if you're not sure that your work is going to be considered. The eligibility criteria are always slightly different, but it's generally that if your work was distributed in the United States between January 1st and December 31st of that year, it is eligible for consideration. So the judges will each do it, obviously, as much reading as they can throughout the year once they know they're going to be doing this. And then they all get together for, like, apparently a 3-day binge of comic book reading and talking to each other and sort of debating between different viewpoints. So one of the women on the committee this year wrote an appropriately vague but really fun sort of, like, retrospective on the experience where she was saying, we all had
I
different.
didn't read that.
It was Martha Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
Thomas. She writes for Comic Mix. You can find her sort of write up on it. And she was talking about, the interesting thing that like the first day they sort of put down everything that's just okay, and then they sort of just go to war over the stuff that's great and get each other to read things and sort of try to narrow it down to between 4 and 6 final nominees in each category. And once the nominees are out, comic book professionals and industry professionals do the voting on those nominees.
Retailers vote as well,
I
right?
believe retailers and managers do get a vote. I've never voted in them because I didn't realize that.
Well, you can vote this year.
I just
and
have to find out
I will
from Paul
give
whether I'm
you
technically a manager.
$5 to vote for me.
Just throws everything.
I
out
maybe
of
should
the
have said that on
Sexy
video.
video.
I
I
was
should
about
have
to
said
say
that
you've
on
now
video.
said it on video.
That was a joke.
Just remember,
Wait, wrong
crimes
eye.
have
Wrong
real
eye.
consequences.
Thank you.
It is.
what
It
we're
is
learning.
Martha Thomas's.
Thomas's. Thank you
Thomas's.
very much. And so the voting is done by industry professionals, and the winners are awarded at a ceremony on Friday night at San Diego Comic-Con. And there's sort of a nice little gala, which, reminder, I went into it last week, but this is the great unknown secret of San Diego Comic-Con. If you have a badge for San Diego Comic-Con, you can attend the Eisner Awards.
It's really easy and it doesn't fill.
The room is not full because nobody
Yeah.
knows this. Everyone
There's
assumes you
not a
need-
line to get in.
Yeah.
Like you can.
I didn't actually
walk
even know
up.
where it was
My
held.
first year, I stumbled
Yep.
in. I literally, I feel like I got shoved off the sidewalk and just, sort of looked around going, what is this and why do I recognize all these people?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so I would love to hear experiences from folks because obviously we'll get to you have some very direct experience with it. I've been going. I forgot to actually do the math, but I was definitely there for the 25th. So I think, and it's the 29th this year. So I've been probably going for about 5 years since I realized that you could go, and then got super hooked on it because it it's an award show, so it's a lot of people reading out names, but it's also this amazing chance to watch the people who do amazing work in this field I love get honored, which they very rarely are. It's really, really moving every year and wonderful every year, and the speeches are funny, and I really enjoy it. So now I'm hooked on it. And what was that one? So you wandered in. That was your first experience.
I haven't been in many years because my Comic-Con experience has changed drastically over my lifetime. But when I started going to Comic-Con, I was a retailer. And so my Comic-Con experience was I worked a booth all day and then would cosplay for a little bit, and then I would just have a series of events that I would attend. And the Eisners, especially if I had friends who were nominated for something, I would go to the Eisners or I'd go to the cosplay show. I haven't been
The Masquerade.
I haven't been to the Masquerade in so long.
I don't think I've ever been to the.
I haven't been.
I haven't been to the
Masquerade.
same
I
one.
watched it from the sales pavilion.
My last year was Rock Year 2, which is a inside joke that no one remembers at this point. Do you remember Rock? Somebody had I want to say it was a Hawkman costume, but they actually came out on a giant moving like rock platform, like an action figure. But then they couldn't get the Rock to leave, so like people at some point it was just this giant boulder on stage, and people just started chanting Rock, and like Rock became very exciting.
Oh
because
my God!
Wonderful.
It was a whole year of like people
Horrible.
demanding the return of Rock. This was a long time ago.
Comic-Con is the best.
Yeah,
Comic-Con's wonderful.
I was sitting next to Ricky Simons of all people for all that too, so it was just him going, "This doesn't make any sense," in his gur voice. These days, I haven't had time. I've been busy through.
You're usually booked.
The eyes.
Yeah.
At this point, like even getting to a panel is becoming complicated.
And Jody, we know you have not had a chance to
Yeah,
attend, so this
and
will be your first.
yeah, and this will be my 11th year in a row going to San Diego Comic-Con, and I've
Oh.
never been to the Eisners. But a lot of, I think Friday night's usually when they show the premiere of the DC animated, whatever that is. So me and my friends have usually done that. So that's usually what I've been doing on Friday nights.
Not this year.
Not this year.
So Matt, you ever been to the Eisners?
Have you ever been to the Eisner?
I have. I have. It was actually very interesting to get pulled into that whole process. If you don't know, I got to be the ghostwriter for John Barrowman, who hosted last year. I wrote all of his jokes. I suggested that I had to watch so many YouTube videos of John Barrowman at panels, like for years, and he loves doing Comic-Cons around the globe. And I got to get on the phone with him and talk to him about some of his experiences, and he is immediately one of the most charming men in the world. Like he's just like, well, hello, Matt. It's very wonderful to talk to you. I'm very excited to work with you. I've heard wonderful things, and I can't believe that I'm so lucky as to work with you. And I'm just like, all right, sure. And his assistant was lovely and wonderful, and he was game for every single joke. And when I finally actually got to sit down with him over lunch to go over all the scripts with him, he just kept like touching my leg and like very tactile person, but in a very like loving, supportive way. And it was just like one of the, like, I was terrified because I was like, this is the first time he's seeing my jokes and he's going to be reading them in front of me for the first time. Like, it was like, I had emailed them to him, but I found out like, oh, he hasn't had a chance to look at them, so he's going to be looking at your script for the first time with you there.
Like reading. Yikes.
And so like that entire day, that was Thursday, the entire day I'm just like a basket case. And we got to lunch and he read the opening line and started just laughing so hard. And he was like, you wrote this? And I was like, uh-huh. He's like, oh, I don't even remember what the joke was. I just remember him laughing really hard and going, I can't. You're going to make me look so good. Thank you, Matt. I'm so excited to have you on. I was like, like tears, or like I'm keeping tears from coming out of my face. But then we got to the Eisners, and I don't think Jackie Estrada liked me.
Oh.
Because so my job was to be a hired gun for John Barrowman. John Barrowman, if you know him at all from any of his conventions, is not a clean man. He's pretty rated.
He's got some sauciness.
He's got some sass.
Yeah.
He's got some saucy sass.
There's a barbecue sauce that it's been glazed and cooked.
I was gonna say honey glaze.
Honey glazed.
Yeah, and he is very explicit about his relationships, previous affairs, everything. It's all on the table. If it's entertaining, he'll say it. And I had to write for Rated R, and Jackie Estrada saw the scripts and was like, "Oh, this will never fly." And I was like, "Then why did you say yes to John Barrowman?" Like, so I had to go and write PG versions of every single joke. And when we sat down to that lunch, Barrowman looked at him and was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, well, they wanted PG version. He's like, I don't want to do PG. I want to do the rated R version. I'm rated R. I'm X. Like, I don't want to do PG. And I was like, I mean, I think the rated R stuff is funnier. I'm more excited to do that stuff, but I just know that Jackie, he's like, I don't care. I'll walk. Like, either I do the rated R version or I don't do the show at all. And everyone was like, cool, rated R it is. And I just got the evilest eyes from Jackie all night. Like, when she met me, like, I was introduced as, this is John Barrowman's writer. Her handshake went from, hi, it's nice to meet you, to, oh. And like,
this is the devil on his right shoulder. Like,
yeah.
oh yes, okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
and she turned immediately cold. And I was like, I was just doing my job. I just pulled the trigger where I pointed the gun where I was told. Don't hate me.
Fascinating. It was
Yeah.
interesting because watching the show last year, like, there were moments where I was sort of like, this is a surprising tone for the Eisners, but it's John Barrowman and he's so charismatic that I can kind of like this all sort of fits together.
I was in a weird spot.
Is it usually considered a family-friendly event, or?
I
I feel like bringing kids to award shows is not necessarily, just in general, like making kids sit through award
I'm a
shows.
little iffy on
is
bringing
like,
adults to award shows.
It's interesting because I think like you can never stop sort of people who just won an award from dropping F-bombs or whatever. But in general, like the presentations I had seen had been sort of like playful but not risque in general, because it's the same award ceremony where they're giving out awards for kids and all this other stuff. It was like, as an audience member, I was just like, I'm finding this a little bit odd, but John Barrowman's so damn charming that I absolutely would have said yes, do it. Like,
Yeah.
so
And, like, it
I
was
feel
just-
like it was a good call.
it was a
That's
great
fine.
call.
Thank you. And like John Barrowman was like, just the most incredibly accessible and wonderful person to work with. And like, he would like I suggested to him, I was like, hey, you love cosplay. Comic-Con HQ we can get a cosplay, like a costume maker to make costumes for you. So here, do you want to do that? You're going, I have to write 4 bits for you, 5 bits. Do you want costumes for each of those? And he's like, oh my God, yes, please make suggestions to me. So I looked at every single presenter and made suggestions based on who he was introducing and what the category was.
So you were writing this at Moby's, if I recall. Moby's is a local coffee shop, and I remember like walking in on a lot of these writing because I get a lot of work done there too. And can you say what costume didn't get used? Because it broke my heart. Or can we not say that?
No, I can say it.
Okay, because there was a costume that didn't get. Well, we should probably tell them what costumes got selected.
So the costumes that were selected were when he.
Google Barrowman Eisner's 2016.
Oh, you're gonna see some
You're
great.
gonna,
Yeah.
It was so much fun. And,
I hit a different level of I can't believe this is happening delight every time he came out again.
And Catherine Elhofer, I know, was like one of the costumers on it. I think she made all of them and had some help from other people, but I know she made the base of all of them. And she hated me for suggesting Harley Quinn, but not the sexed up like Suicide Squad run, and not the Arkham Asylum one. The original Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, Harley Quinn. And I was like, if you do any of the other versions, the fans may be a little frustrated or upset with you. This is the version to go with. He's like, well, that's the version I would want. I don't want the other versions. Those are gross and sexist. I want this version.
Although he would look good in the roller derby.
I was about to
No,
say
he
he
would
would
look
actually. I was like
amazing in the
actually
roller
imagining
derby.
him.
And
in
actually,
roller
now that
derby
you say that, I do
Now
remember
I'm thinking
saying,
about it going, what?
this one is acceptable, this one is preferred. Roller derby, this one's acceptable. You could do this one. This is the preferred one. I think the fans would like this one the most. And that's the one that he wanted to do. So that was the 4th costume he came out with. And he came out with Phil Lamar in that one, which I thought was
Lamar
There's a.
Oh, there we
there
are.
he is.
Yes.
Yep, there he is.
Oh my.
His first costume, when the first time he came out, just a suit, because this is the costume that disappointed me. But he came out in just a suit because he didn't want to show his hand too soon.
fair.
The second was he was introducing Matt Groening, and he came out as Zap Brannigan.
I remember
With
this.
the incredibly short, and he was backstage having so much fun with it, like just mooning all of us and.
Because John Barrowman and Zap Brannigan, that's a match made in heaven.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
Yeah, he was perfect.
There we
for
go.
it. There it is.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you, Zach.
And this is all backstage where I'm off to like his right, watching all of these pictures happen. And then But then the best costume, or my favorite costume at least, was him as Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, I've seen that picture before.
And
it's
that
amazing.
was the one that I basically told him he had to do. I was like, here's 3 choices for each category. I don't even remember what else I recommended.
I can tell you one of them, and I will
There
let you
we
know
go.
when, because there was one that broke my heart. That's amazing, though. That had to happen.
That's the best one.
I
God,
love that one.
tail.
He loved that one. He was like, I'm gonna wear this to every convention I ever go to. He was like tramping around
I guess
backstage
if
the
they were
entire
made for
time.
him, he
they're
gets to
all
keep
they're
them.
all they're
Yeah.
all made exactly for him. Like he had measurements. They were all made specific for him.
That was the moment where I was having the most conflict of I was like, I've never been so happy, but also it is very strange to hear someone doing like off-color comedy in a Squirrel Girl costume. But this is also like really great and amazing, and so you gave me like one of the unforgettable con experiences of all time. Thank you.
well,
Really,
and-
it's not a
and-
con if you're not uncomfortable.
And I did it for
minutes.
Erica Henderson and Ryan North because they were backstage and he was introducing them, and they were both backstage just like. And I turned around and I was like, "Hey, I just want to tell you, like, my wife and I are, well, fiance at the time, are giant fans of your work. Like, my fiance especially is like Squirrel Girl is her lifelong favorite character." And they were like, "Uh-huh." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You need to focus." They're like, "We just can't." And they kind of like pointed to stage, and then they looked at me and like I think Ryan said like, are you responsible for this? Did you do this? And I was like, yeah. Is that okay? And they're like, this is breaking us because we love him and now he's dressed as our character. And then Erica Henderson looks at me and goes, what are we supposed to be doing? Like they legitimately forgot what they were supposed to do.
They
and I was
came
like,
on stage with those exact looks.
Yeah.
Like it read to the audience that they were like,
Yeah.
Oh,
But the one that broke my heart because Barrowman is a giant fan of musicals. He loves singing. He
Oh
loves
God,
doing
this
all
is
that
the
stuff.
one. This is
yeah.
the one that broke my heart when
This
I saw
broke my
your
heart
list. I saw your
so
list.
much. Yeah, I was
Damn it.
showing you my list and asking for suggestions of anything I missed. For the opening,
Yeah.
I was dying and I pushed so hard, but I understood why he said no. But I pushed so hard for him to come out and do Dazzler,
Classic Dazzler.
classic
Classic
Roller
Dazzler.
86
skating.
roller skate Dazzler.
Bodysuit.
I was
roller
like,
skates.
I will write a song. Here are 3 or 4 80s songs that I think would be fun to mimic.
broke my
I,
heart.
I will write a song about all the nominees, about how more, like there's a woman nominated in every category for the first time in the history of the Eisners. I will write all of that stuff down in a song. You just need to tell me what song if you decide that you want to do Dazzler. And he was like, that sounds fun, but I think it's better for the
he
rest
had,
of the
he had
show.
a very fair point.
If I come out and don't tip my hand. And I was like, but you would be doing the Eisners with a musical number, and that would be also amazing. So,
Save it for
it
another
was
year.
good
Save it
both
for
ways.
another
It
year,
partly
yeah.
like I can testify to the audience effect of watching the escalation as it went on. It was incredible. I was just like, I cannot rule out that he's gonna come down from the ceiling in like
Yeah.
sitting in a moon replica or something. And as someone, I mean, unlike a lot of veterans, I haven't been going for all 29 years,
Mm-hmm.
but like I had grown accustomed to sort of what to expect from the Eisners,
Sure.
which is that like. They would be like earnest and straightforward and devoted to the things that I
Mm-hmm.
love, which are the things that I want out of them. I want them to be like, you know, have the capacity for dryness and be filled with respect for all of this stuff. I wasn't expecting that you would all like that we could have this like and get an ultra charismatic host who really does love what he's talking about, who will like just inject life into every part of the proceedings. Like that was a thing that I was sort of like fine with not always. Like, I had seen, there'd been excellent presenters in the past, but there hadn't been sort of someone in the years that I've been going who was, like, the backbone of the entire show in that sort of presenter fashion. Like, because Phil Lamar nearly every year shows up to present something, because Phil Lamar is a huge comic book nerd.
Oh, he's delightful.
Like, and a really delightful human.
yeah,
and so
he's a great human being.
I was used to seeing, like, a lot of excellent presenters over the years, but like, rarely someone who could so combine like the charisma and the ability to have or acquire the knowledge and passion, like all the traits that you want in one package. So good job.
Yeah. That was one of the things that Comic Con HQ wanted to do was like make like an actual show, and this was their first attempt at like, hey, we're gonna make this an actual show, and for years after this, it's going to be a bigger and bigger and bigger deal. I don't know how Comic Con HQ is doing. I don't know if they're gonna try and do that again this year, but Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do last year, and John Barrowman was delightful, and everyone at the Eisners was really great. You know, it was just like Jackie was the only sort of thorn in my side, but that was also.
She doesn't hate you. She just was trying to strike a delicate balance. Can you imagine, like, you've been running these awards
Sure.
since 1990, and you're
Of
just
course.
like, please let this not be the year it goes wildly off the rails and everyone complains. Like,
Yeah, no,
you know.
I totally get that, and don't blame her for it. It was just like I was like, do you not appreciate where I'm stuck here? Like I have to write for him, and
That's a hard place to be, though.
Right.
yeah. But it was just like I'll never forget her handshake with me, where she was like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Oh, you're the writer. Oh, yeah, we have problems with you." And I was like,
My general feeling, I know that you're not supposed to shoot the messenger, but honestly, often it's the only person you can shoot.
Sure.
And it feels real good.
Sure.
It feels real good.
Sure.
I'm personally kind of a fan of shooting the messenger. I mean, like, not every time, and you don't want them to like know it's coming, but like you feel, like
I'm
it is.
remembering this for Friday.
No, it's definitely like it's like a deep tissue massage for the soul. I mean, like, you know, for at least an hour, you're like, I'm so relaxed. My problem hasn't gone away.
I killed that.
The problem's
messenger.
still there, but
Just
I feel
to watch
better.
him die.
I feel relaxed. I feel like the day that I can get things done. I was Skeletor in another life. You have been learning this every Friday, both of you.
Yes.
Have been learning that I was
Yes, we
Skeletor in
have.
another life. Okay.
Yeah, so the Eisners, that was a lot of fun to do, and it was very surprising to see like all the VIP tables up at the front. Here's all the nominees, and then to see no one in attendance in the seats in the back. It was like, here's 300, 400 seats and 25 people sitting in them.
Maybe 100.
I'm gonna.
Maybe.
I keep wanting to go, and I keep trying to go, and I hope that my schedule is going to allow for it.
You should come this year.
If my schedule allows for it.
The other great secret is that the people who make all your dreams, like a lot of them just end up sort of hanging out afterwards in the reception, in the room outside. So
Oh, there's a
I
reception.
met
Yeah,
Neil
there's a
Gaiman.
reception.
See, I don't know
It is
yet.
a great way to meet people.
Yeah, I got to
met
meet Jason Aaron last year, and
Yep.
it was like he was incredibly awkward and like, "Who are you? Like, why are you talking to me?" Which I didn't blame him for. Like, I don't think that was a fault, but it was like,
You're very tall.
"Oh my God, you write Southern Bastards and Doctor Strange, and I need to meet you right now." And he's like, "All right, it's good to meet you." And I was like, "Congrats on everything." He's like, "Okay," and I was like, "I'm making this awkward. Goodbye."
I also met him at San Diego last year, and like one of the like hanging out people, you know, late at night, and I was just like, "You're one of the reason I started reading Marvel again."
Oh yeah.
He
He's
gave one of
great.
my favorite speeches at the Eisners last year, which is the other thing like that I just love about it is like not all the folks who are nominated are able to attend. It's usually pretty funny because like Eric Stevenson on behalf of Image will end up running up to grab a bunch of awards on behalf of people because they'll win a ton of stuff and like half the people are able to attend and half aren't. But the speeches you do get, like, some of my favorite Comic-Con memories are things like when Ed Piskor won for best, I think he won best reality-based work a few years ago for Hip Hop Family Tree.
That was last year.
Was it last year?
That was last year.
And he
yeah.
went up in his like fisherman's hat and his like white T-shirt, and he said, "If I thought I was gonna win, I wouldn't have worn Fruit of the Loom." or Haynes or whatever. He said
He
made
actually
some
did really
reference
well last year too. I think he won a couple.
I think he won a couple
categories, yeah.
because he writes and draws an amazing comic. And for all I know, he would have worn the exact same thing. But it was this wonderful moment of just like, cartoonists are not used to being celebrated. And this is like, I love watching them all get applauded by a room full of their peers and some certain amount of appreciative fans and pros in the audience watching.
I mean, a lot of comic pros aren't even used to like being around people a lot. I mean, we all work in isolation most of the time. I mean, there's a couple people who set up studios where they're working with other, you know, comic creators, but it's like, I mean, part of the reason I come here and do stuff here is so I see other human beings.
So Jason Aaron gave another one of my favorite speeches last year, where he was talking. I don't remember what he won. He might have won Best Writer last year. Matt, do you remember?
I believe he won Best Writer because he had
Yeah.
Southern Bastards, Scalped. No, he wasn't doing Scalped, but Southern Bastards, Doctor Strange,
Mighty Thor, Doctor Strange.
Mighty Thor, yeah.
Mighty Thor's back up this year also, I feel like.
believe it
I
is.
believe it is, yeah.
So he gave his speech and he talked all about his mother and what a big influence she was on his
Yes, it
comics,
is.
getting into comics. Because he ended up telling this story about how when he was 13 years old, Watchmen was coming out, and he like found the issues and got really excited about it and into it, and he had no friends who read comics. And so he's sitting there talking to a ballroom of people saying, "So my mom went out and got Watchmen so that her 13-year-old son would have someone to talk to.
Oh my God, that's
And
awesome.
like he talked about how
I
she's
forgot
read
about
everything
that.
he's ever done, and like all of this stuff, like all of the craziest. He's like she's the only great grandmother in the world who's reading like some of his crazy violent murder books. And then he was just like, and she's also like she's an enormous Jane Foster fan. Like if you have a problem with Jane Foster Thor, take it up with my mother. And this is like the big beardy Jason Aaron like saying, and so this is a chance to watch people be celebrated for their accomplishments and sort of talk to each other and like make jokes. Like Sergio Aragonis is there every year, which is really, really delightful. He's a very charismatic caricaturist. You know his work from Mad Magazine and a lot of other things, and I love the Eisners.
Real quick,
Yeah.
some of the people in the chat are asking about Dazzler and who Dazzler is, and I realized we just kind of
We did.
My
we just
God.
Put that out there.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Take it, Tom. You're very excited to say this.
So the X-Men universe, there's lots of mutants in the X-Men universe who do all sorts of things. It's kind of fun. Anybody can be a mutant. Post kind of like there was Team 1 and Team 2, and somewhere in the 80s, I want to say, they were introducing a bunch of new characters to the X-Men universe. And they had a series. There was a Hellfire Club story, and there were two big new mutants that got introduced in the Hellfire story that joined the X-Men. One of them was Kitty Pryde.
Dark Phoenix
Yeah.
Saga.
If you take a long enough view, there were 3 mutants who joined the X-Men.
Technically,
Yes.
introduced in that story.
Yes.
Technically 3. Yeah,
But
fair.
one was a villain for a while.
Yeah.
for a long while.
Well, quite a while.
Kitty Pryde was a big one, and then they basically went and they found a disco singing mutant named Dazzler.
And this is great because it's the early 80s, so disco is already considered
Kinda
like
iffy.
like on its way
On its
out.
way out, yeah.
And the outfits that Gene and Scott wore to go to the disco were just
Pretty
lovely.
spectacular. And Dazzler, she has kind of a silly power, which is that she can convert music sound into light.
Isn't it all sound?
All sound
But she just-
convert to
any-
forms of light.
Into
Yeah.
any
Various-
form of light.
Various brightnesses and luminosities and
So she basically brings her own special effects when she's performing,
She's
which
her
is
own
how
stage
she
show.
generally
It's a
uses
fantastic
her power.
idea
Yeah.
for a use
Yeah.
of that power.
And there's actually an enormous amount of mileage one can get out of a kind of out of step music. That's her.
Yeah, that's her.
first,
That's
very
like
first
first
panel, yeah.
appearance,
first panel. And that costume is amazing.
That
there
is so
there
much
are
hair.
roller skates that you can't see, and also there's a little bit of Wicked and Divine.
in skin tight suit.
I'm having a
Yep.
moment of Wicked and Divine with that face paint.
Yes.
when I first read Wicked to Divine, I was like, well, Dazzler.
Yeah.
And there was actually a surprising amount of mileage that we got out of this character, especially having a rock star and sort of or a disco star, and then in the Ultimate Universe, they actually found a really good amalgam of turning her into a punk musician, which I
We
thought
already
was
have
really
Lila
fascinating.
Cheney. I just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Lila later, but like full on punk is what her
Nice.
Ultimate version, which was really like just. And it's always been a really fun, and a lot of people. She has a big fan following because a lot of people like the idea that if you were going to be a mutant, one of the first things you would do is how can I kind of become famous with this? And it was kind of an interesting take.
Kind of their
on
first take on that, yeah.
It was the first time they looked at the notion of a celebrity mutant, and they've pushed it in some really interesting ways in the books, including an alternate future where she becomes president of the United States.
Yeah.
Which was which I thought was a really interesting take on.
You know, at the
on
time it
Allison.
seemed unreasonable.
Does no one remember Reagan, where we're like, you can actually act in a movie with a monkey and still become president?
Yeah.
of the United States,
Anyway.
Anyway,
Yeah, so Dazzler is a rock star, and she does music, and John Barrowman dressed as Dazzler with
in your
a
mind,
have been.
giant, long
in your
blonde
mind,
wig.
In an alternate reality.
In an alternate reality.
in the Ultimate Universe,
Yes.
John Barrowman. dead.
If they bring me back this year and they bring back Barrowman, I will push it again.
And there's a beautiful Dazzler record cover that actually made a cameo in the last X-Men movie.
Oh, yeah.
I have
it's
that.
on Apocalypse.
I have that.
It's based on, is
I
it a
don't-
Sienkiewicz cover or is
I
it something
think
I
it was
want to see it
Sienkiewicz,
Sienkiewicz.
yeah.
like an original painting from when Dazzler had her sort of
Who's-
series
I
that
went and
served as a
bought.
cover.
I pre-ordered X-Men Apocalypse at Comic-Con just so I could get that album cover.
we may have to have Sienkiewicz on just so I can get that album cover at some point.
Sure.
Okay, I'm down
Is that a
for
thing?
That may be a thing. I
Wait,
don't
was
know.
I supposed to bring stuff for you guys?
You're supposed to sign stuff for me.
Oh yeah, I can
there
do
was
that.
a plan.
I can do that.
Okay, we're gonna run quickly through some of our other background stuff so we can spend more time on Jody.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, and you go ahead if you have if you have a list. If not, yeah.
I briefly, the Eisners are not the only comic book awards. I wanted to throw that out there. There are at present sort of 3 big ones that are American. There are the Harvey Awards,
Which is like the Golden Globes of comic awards.
In the voting process is different, but you do get like a lot of notable work being recognized. The key difference in the way the Harveys work is that whereas the Eisners comic pros can all vote and they can all vote for Harveys, in the Harveys it's sort of an open nomination process by any pros, which has meant in the past like you get some cool out of the box choices, but you also can have like a lot of influence. If you run a successful Nominate Me for Harvey campaign, it's a lot more doable.
And especially because retailers also do nominations for the Harvey Award, and if you're a publisher that has really good connections with your retailers who support you, you can really do a get out the vote thing there.
So there's some sort of like it's a different process that's going to have its own strengths and weaknesses, but they are given out every year for the last. They've been going for the same amount of time. I didn't know this, but apparently the Eisners and the Harveys have the same origin, which is that they used to be the Kirby Awards from 85 to 87, but there was a fight between the guy who created them and Fantagraphics that he was partnered with, and they split off into 2 different awards.
That is the most Kirby thing I've
Yeah,
ever heard.
right?
Oh my god.
That's the most
I did
Kirby
not know
origin
that.
story
So, yeah.
ever.
Okay, Wikipedia says this. Have not verified independently. But
And the Harvey Awards are given out at Baltimore Comic
they are
Con in
now
the
for the last
fall,
10
I
years
believe.
or so. They're given out they moved around a little bit, but they've found a home now at the Baltimore Comic Con, which is supposed to be a really, really great show.
I haven't been to that one, but I grew up in Maryland, so I should go sometime.
You should go.
Yeah.
So the Harvey Awards have come out at Baltimore, which is usually at the end of the summer. And there's a third big award called the Ignatz, which is given out at Small Press Expo.
Right.
Which is devoted to sort of Ignatz is also so Kirby's named after Jack Kirby, of course. Harvey's are named after Harvey Kurtzman, one of the great 20th century cartoonists and the creator of Mad Magazine. The Eisner Awards are named after Will Eisner, who we're going to get into. And Ignatz is taken from a reference to the Crazy Cat comic strip by George Harriman. There's like a brick-throwing mouse named Ignatz, and it sort of represents their like little guy mentality. And they award a lot of independent and small press work.
And that's at the Small Press Expo?
So Small Press Expo, I think that's who organizes it, and I believe that's also when and where they're given out. So I think they are nominated and then voted on by sort of like membership attendance at Small Press Expo each year. But there's also international awards. Until recently, there were the Eagle Awards, which was a British organization, I guess, award-giving body. And they were some of the first people to sort of, I knew their name because I'd read it in like Histories of Alan Moore. Like his 2000 AD stuff was starting to pick up eagles that got him noticed by the Americans. And of course there are major awards given out at shows like Angoulême in France. So the most prestigious comic award goes out, and a whole suite of them in Japan that I did not have time to.
And the big one in Canada that I'm blanking on the
what is
name.
the Canadian one? This I did not look up.
Give me a sec.
I will
Thank
look it
you.
up.
Or because you can
Yeah,
probably
you've
type
got a
faster.
proper machine.
It is. I know the name of it, and I'm blanking on it right now because I'm super prepared.
You're not supposed to do the research. I'm supposed to do the research. I'm
Okay,
the one
well,
who.
The Joe Shuster
Thank you.
Awards?
Oh, of course.
The Schuster Awards.
Named after the co-creator of Superman. So that's
And
the
it's sad I could
landscape.
not remember that name while I'm wearing this. Okay, I'll just leave now.
No, stay.
Okay, I'll stop.
I had some great shade to throw at DC just now, and I just decided not to. It's like, you're not the only one who has trouble remembering Joel Schuster.
Well, funny story.
Yeah,
Funny
there we
story
go.
that every year at the Eisners they give out the Bill Finger Award for excellence
Oh,
in
yeah.
comic book writing, which I love because for a long time that was just a like, hey, remember that another guy contributed to Batman other than Bob Kane? And now we've reached a point where Bill Finger is much more commonly credited as
Yeah,
co-creator
he's
of
getting,
Batman.
Yeah.
and there was a whole contract thing there where where Bob Kane's contract, I think, forbade Bill Finger from getting
I
credit.
think it
or
just
something
said
like
that he had to be credited as creator, but since nobody else had negotiated for that, like it was
just got eaten.
if you're the only
Yeah.
person who demanded to be remembered, everybody else gets forgotten the way that
Yeah.
you would have been had
Which
you not
is,
negotiated for that.
You know, say what you will about Bob Kane, that is pretty savvy of him.
Yeah.
Like, I
Funny
think it was
story.
wrong, but
Early early creator rights stuff comes in with Will Eisner,
Yes,
who
it does.
successfully negotiated a lot of rights to The Spirit. And then in interviews, he'd say, like, and I always thought that was because they respected my creative vision, but it turns out they just really wanted to hire me because they knew I could do things on time. So they just gave me whatever I was asking for.
Well, yeah, there's the three things you look for in comic creators. Like, can they meet deadlines? Are they good? And are they decent to work with? And as long as you have, they say, as long as you have two of those, you can have a career in comics.
So I could have a career in comics. I just need to actually be good at writing them.
Which one are
But
you bad
I
at?
The writing
I
of
mean,
the
because you're a
comic.
horrible jerk and nobody would want to work
Exactly.
with you.
And
so
you're
that's
always
not-
late. That's really.
Oh shoot! No, I would be actually a terrible writer.
You actually just showed up for last week's show. You were literally an entire week behind.
I was a
We're
whole
pushing.
week behind. Like, hey, aren't we talking about Brian K. Vaughan today?
That's
Okay,
my best joke I have. That's what I've got.
It's not a bad joke.
It's not a bad joke.
let's talk a little bit about this Eisner guy.
Uncle Will? Let's talk about Uncle Will.
What's Eisner? What's that mean?
I actually spent this week catching up on a bunch of Will Eisner because it had been a long time since I read any, and I will say I came to Will Eisner because of a forward a Sandman forward that I read where Neil gave a little love to Will Eisner, and I was like, I'm always fascinated by the notion of the creators that I love, what they were reading. Mm-hmm. I love the notion of the DNA of creativity, like that like everyone's just like, oh, you just wake up one morning and I'm 6 years old and I suddenly have 1,000 stories in my head. I'm going to tell them all,
it
then
doesn't work
die.
like that.
It doesn't work that way. Much like people, storytellers have there's a genetic code, and there are genetics that are passed down in the way that we tell stories and how they function. And some of the wonderful early DNA of especially of American comics is Will Eisner in the way that he would tell stories.
And we should shout out that we did not mark it on the show at the time, I think, but March 6th, I think, of this year would have been Will Eisner's 100th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So we are in the centennial year for Will Eisner.
Wow.
Which is pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
He's had an enormous amount of influence on the way that comic book stories are told and the directions that they work. And his character, the Spirit, is despite a very strange film that we're not probably going to talk about.
It's not important.
Although there is still a billboard for that movie up in North Hollywood right now.
Oh my God.
What?
It looked like they peeled off like 15 layers of billboard, and what was left was an ad for the Spirit. It's actually on my Instagram if
Oh
you go
my
check.
gosh.
I love North
Oh my
Hollywood. North
God.
Hollywood is
NoHo?
NoHo is such a
Yep, that was this weekend. That
Oh
was
my.
free comic book day.
that's the strangest
I don't
thing
know.
ever.
I don't know if I
That's a
can.
dark image.
At the,
I don't.
Oh my
I
God.
don't know if I can.
Oh my
It's
God.
on-
It's on my
Yeah.
Instagram.
I threw a couple of sample. If you've got that sans serif, I think, page up for Will Eisner that I threw in there. Will Eisner was a writer and artist active from the late 30s until his death, basically, who devoted his entire life to advancing the art form of comics. At the tender age of, I think, 22, he'd already been doing it professionally for a couple of years in his studio. Oh yeah, I just threw some sample
Is that's
I'm
Starwin
looking for
Cook.
I'm looking for the Pagal, what's her name?
Pigal?
What yes.
P''Gall?
You can find show me the boom. There we go.
Oof.
Wow.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is what it looked like as printed in the Chicago Sun. The Spirit is a very interesting example of comics because Will Eisner had been working in comics for a couple of years already when he was approached by a newspaper syndicate, essentially, that said, we are feeling sort of at the time, serious adventure stories in comics in the strips were a thing. You might remember holdouts like Prince Valiant from sort of the old school of comic book storytelling, where not everything was funny gag-a-day strips, and a lot of comics had more space. So there was a serious rivalry that was emerging in the late 30s, early 40s as comic books were born, and newspapers started to say hey, we don't want to lose all of our valuable Flash Gordon readership over to comics. So they approached a comic book artist to do an original one for their Sundays that started out as a 16-page supplement, essentially a comic book that came inside your newspaper. It was extremely successful. One of the pilot papers that started offering the Spirit supplement saw a 10% circulation increase.
Oh, wow.
At its height, his Spirit supplement, which got cut down to 8 pages, was in like 20
20
papers
to 22 papers,
for
if
a
I
combined
recall.
circulation of 5 million.
Holy
5
crap.
million people.
Wow.
And of that early, like the 16 pagers, there was 7 or 8 pages at first that were this original character Will Eisner had made up and miraculously retained the rights to, named Denny Colt.
So Denny
aka
Colt, just so
the Spirit.
just so you know why Denny Colt was the Spirit and kind of his vibe. He was a detective in a blue suit who would wear a domino mask, and we'll get into that really quickly in a second because that's funny. And
Brilliantly illustrated
Yes.
by our
Yes.
own
Ken
Ken
Wynn.
Thank you, Ken.
putting the Spirit behind it, putting Denny behind us, which I'm quite happy with. And Denny was just sort of a charming, funny, charismatic, quick-witted detective who, due to circumstances that are covered in the book, which are kind of fun, is declared legally dead. He didn't die. This was his cat. This is why he was called the Spirit. It was because
Placed into suspended animation.
placed in suspended animation, buried, or put it, and then came back.
Very common.
happens.
But
Very
it's
common.
no
It happens to me like
superpowers.
3 times a year.
But kind of uses the fact that everyone assumes that he's dead as kind of a little bit of his bit, and it sometimes can help him solve crimes. And Denny wore the domino mask to disguise himself. Oh boy.
Apparently, this was because his editor was like, "Does he have a costume? He needs a costume." And Eisner's like, "He mask,
There's a-
gloves, yes."
Yes,
Yeah.
costume. it was the we want a
He
superhero
wanted
book.
an ordinary story that he could do any kind of different thing with, so that was his compromise.
Was putting a mask on
Yep.
this
Because he didn't want to
basically.
write a superhero book. 'Cause,
No,
like,
no.
he was
He wanted to
highly.
write
He was,
everything.
but he was also like highly influenced by pulp comics,
Well,
right?
he famously
That's a
turned
very
down
cult character.
Superman. He famously.
I don't know this story.
Yeah, like Siegel and Schuster apparently were like, "We've got a book," and he's like, and you know, and was never bitter or anything about it. It was definitely like who can tell in this business? You know?
Yeah.
It's like, that Superman guy will never amount to anything.
We don't publish that
More
kind of
like
thing.
super boring. I'm good, thanks, Mister.
But so the Spirit Runner, and like he hands out little tombstones as kind of his calling. I mean, like I love this.
Yeah.
This stuff is great. And
Wait,
it's,
are they actual stones or are they just like business cards cut
you
in
know,
the shape of
no,
tombstones?
because they're actually like
Oh,
it's like
God.
the size of
Donation.
a pound cake. Like
Yeah.
you're handing somebody like a Twinkie.
What if it was actually a cake, like just wrapped
It's
in?
actually
that would be
it's like a
great.
delicious like, you know, what do you want on your tombstone kind of vibe.
Quick
Here's
note,
your
Wow.
last meal.
Wow.
quick
What
note,
do you want on your
the Spirit
tombstone?
comic strip was a product of its time, and it featured a black sidekick who has not aged well.
And that is true, and it was eventually replaced by another sidekick who was then eventually replaced because Eisner eventually I will say after Eisner came around later and had this conversation of I went and I traveled and I had a bit of life and came back, and after having some discussion, people contact me and discuss these things, and I eventually realized this is a bit of a problem. And then I had more conversations with this is a huge problem, and he did very much later on go like I did my best to sort of correct this, and I don't regret anything that I wrote or how I did it, but definitely upon reflection.
Well, the year was 1940, and he was 22 years
Yeah,
old.
and he was 40 and
Yeah.
22 years old, and he was definitely began having that discussion, which was I give him a lot of credit for. It was pretty miraculous at the time to sit down and actually start reflecting on one's work that way. So
Yeah.
at that in that place and
Interesting.
time.
There was no internet to yell at him back then.
No.
There were letters.
Letters.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, people write letters.
But the letters that people and like people were writing him letters, and he was having correspondence with people, and realizing that he had a responsibility, especially and some of his later work was very much a response to that, as sort of I realize now, like I'm trying to remember, he had some very interesting wording where he was like, I understand that caricature is essential for the work I do, because that is the shorthand of this type of graphic information is caricature. But I'm also realizing that caricature has a responsibility. And I don't entirely understand what it is or how that functions yet, and I'm learning more every day.
That's the genius of Will Eisner, is that I don't understand how that functions yet, and I'm learning more every day. Was his motivating ethic every time he drew a new page,
Yeah.
like for a 40, 50-year career.
And no one understood yet. Like there was that conversation had just begun. There was not somebody sitting. It's one of those interesting
Black
things.
people knew it sucked, but
Well, they knew it sucked, but if you're like, well, how do you fix it? There would be okay, we're going to have to sit down and have a long conversation about it. And that long conversation has been going on.
I mean, it's still going on, really.
We're still figuring that shit out. It's fascinating, but this was the beginnings of that conversation in comic books, and was definitely going back later, even from the spirit, and going, yes, and there's some racism in the spirit, Lord.
That's just it's a reader warning for, you're going to pick up anything from the 40s, you're going to get, warnings like this.
Yes.
It's not...
And he eventually had a book which was part of his response to that, which was Fagin the Jew.
So Will Eisner evolves from I'm taking jobs doing adventure strips to I've got my own sort of adventure character that's a detective story guy that lets me play in all these different genres, to essentially, for our purposes, kind of inventing the graphic novel.
I think that's fair.
He always believed in the literary potential of comics. It took time to get to this point, but he began by innovating on layouts and panel design. He's the person that we talked about in previous episodes of sort of he saw Citizen Kane and he sort of staggered home full of visions of the ways that he could adapt some of those techniques into comic book storytelling. And he created whole new ones that, there's a reason Neil Gaiman talks about him. The introduction to the first of these archives is written by Alan Moore in 1986, talking about how this guy is, just I think he said gave comics its brains.
There's
invented sophistication.
There's a fictionalized retelling of that story of him going to see Citizen Kane and having his. And if you've never seen Citizen Kane, it's if you ever want to be a creator.
That people hadn't done shots like that, because we live in a world post Eisner. We live in a world post Citizen Kane.
But if you watch Citizen Kane now, it still feels like it could have been made yesterday.
It's the difference between watching an amazing athletic experience and then going in with a microscope and looking at the DNA that has made this possible. It's one is definitely far more kinetic, but there's a fictionalized version of this story. And what is that? The book, The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. They fictionalized the story with their fictional comic book creators. Actually, had the same thing where they went to see Citizen Kane
probably blended
and
the real
walked
story
away.
And the Cavalier and Clay version.
There's a lot.
It's
It's an interesting fictional retelling of this story.
That book is one of the great, please for the love of God, read Cavalier and Clay.
It's a great book despite the lack of pictures.
It's a novel that's about comic book creators and the birth of comics, and is just incredible. Anyway,
but the thing I like about Fagin the Jew, and I'm gonna put this out here as an interesting story to talk about. There's Cavalier and Clay. What a great book. Maybe they'll make a movie for those who refuse to read.
It would never live up to it.
I know. Is that the story and hearing it from especially from the introduction by Will about the story is of him going I'm going to take a personal experience, because all these people are writing about their personal experience with the characters I write and how it makes them feel uncomfortable or unhappy about how they're represented. So I'm going to find one that made me unhappy, was this realization that Fagin, the character from Oliver Twist, was kind of this Jewish caricature. It was this very creepy Jewish caricature from classical literature. And I'm going to figure out how I would redeem this character. And it's very much Eisner's attempt to redeem Fagin and anybody who's read Oliver Twist, Fagin is a vicious, vile, child exploiting bastard of a character, as only he can write. And as somebody who's performed that, read it and performed that show several times in my youth, I've always been fascinated by Fagin. He's an interesting character, and what a great way to sort of save that character from the annals of two-dimensional caricature. But if you want something a little lighter, that's also on Comixology. Do we want to talk about PS Magazine? I think PS Magazine is really fascinating.
It makes it fun. I didn't bring up any images for it, but
that's fine. If you look up Will Eisner PS Magazine, something will pop up, and maybe it'll show up on stage. Do you want to do the intro? I've been talking a lot.
Oh, as if I haven't. I'm sorry.
No, I mean but anybody who wants
excited. To. I haven't read a lot of Preventive Maintenance Monthly, but I remember when they released this collection in stores, and we were like, "This is incredible." Will Eisner, I believe, during his time at the Army, or
it was. I think it was during or just after, because they were also they once they saw how effective it was, there was a lot of. They were sending him out to be with the troops to actually see.
So this may have been after, because Will Eisner actually 2 years into this lovely successful job he has writing and creating The Spirit, he gets drafted because this World War II.
This is after.
So he spends a couple years actually in the Army. He comes back and goes back to writing his strip and everything. But he eventually ends up doing this the most wonderful possible art that you could have for a magazine designed to teach basic
51 to 71.
Engineering maintenance skills. It's
It
called
is-
Preventive Maintenance Monthly.
And it is a
What year?
magazine, 51 to 71, produced
Okay.
by the Army for the Army, using comic books to teach soldiers about equipment maintenance.
Yeah.
It's great. It's little short stories about how to load a truck is the first one. Is like how to put weight on a truck and how to do it in a way that won't strain the engine. Or make it difficult to steer, and how it works in the various different times. And then things like, we know occasionally this is how much weight you're supposed to put on a truck. We know that there are going to be times where you're going to be forced to overload a truck because you're in the Army. So this is how to overload it, and then this is how to deal with the engine. And there's a whole thing of how to start an engine when it stalls. And there's a whole sequence of maybe the electrical's out. No, you would smell smoke. So we know that that's not the problem. Well, take a look at the and literally it's like this kind of smart, a little dopey soldier talking to another older, a little dimmer soldier about what he's doing wrong and how to prevent it. And there's a sexy MP that pops up eventually, very much like "Hello, Nurse." It's obviously there's
it is for the
Oh my.
Army.
yeah, here's her for the men. There's just nothing. There's a Christmas one where she's changing out of a Santa suit, and then there's a giant for the equipment she's just bought, grease and lube. Oh dear. But yes, obviously very pin-up-y, but it's an amazing book, and it was very popular, and it's also a lot of really good information about how
Lighten
to.
your supply room load.
Andrea Cortez in the chat says, "Hello, nurse?" ?
She's very yeah.
Hello, nurse was
Hello, Nurse from
Watch
Animaniacs.
Animaniacs.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I guess there's people who don't know what Animaniacs
Oh
are.
my God, I suddenly feel old.
Sorry.
Yeah, I brought
It's
that
a-
question in just to make us all feel
A nice
Thank
old,
you. Thank you.
a sort of throwbacky, pin-up cute character
From Animaniacs.
Who had a one-shot comic actually,
she
where
really?
she was hello nurse agent of something, and she
Oh my
had a
God, I
super
remember
suit at
that.
one point.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was a.
I remember that.
And
Oh
her,
my God.
her sister was an evil redheaded nurse, and
my
worked
God.
for basically it was a whole spy agency, and they all dressed like hello nurse. It was a whole thing.
But yeah, she's a character in the book, and she's definitely used to sort of tantalize the soldiers into performing proper maintenance on their equipment, and occasionally
Okay, this is hilarious.
I
There's
know.
no way for us to show this, is there?
here we can
There.
flip it.
I'm just
and
gonna
then
show her.
Oh, sorry, it was Agent of Hubba.
definitely Agent of
my
Hubba. Yeah,
God.
it's very cheesecake.
All right, guys.
And
this
boy,
is-
Will knew how to. Will was a big fan of cheesecake. So it's definitely a thing.
Wow.
I know, isn't it
Okay.
amazing?
Connie, to spring again.
Connie,
the
thank
bird
you.
is on the wing again.
Here, yeah.
Here,
Let's
we're
just
gonna-
get up and do
We're
it.
gonna dramatically read this page. I'm sorry.
Do you want to we both want to take this?
Yes.
I'll take the soldier.
Practitioner of
You
comics.
take Connie.
All right.
Here. Ah, Connie, spring again. The bird is on the wing again. Tell me, babe, what does it make you think of?
I blush to say, Joey.
Come on, baby. You can tell me.
I'm thinking your vehicle should have a spring tune-up.
my.
Antifreeze. And here she is on this table. Drain it and store it in 50-gallon drums you get from QM. Clean and flush cooling system. Blow out radiators. Whoops!
I am.
Got a pin?
No, I'm busy checking the thermostat.
Yay!
Oh my.
We have
Oh my
learned
God.
preventive maintenance, guys.
Yay!
Also, here's the cover for, I guess the one I had was the second issue.
Oh my God, the return of
Oh
Hello
my
Nurse.
God.
Agent
Oh.
of Hubba.
Look at that 90s outfit.
I
It's
totally remember that.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I love this. I think this is just I will admit I'm a fan of the Marilyn Monroe era cheesecake.
honestly,
I mean,
divorced from
And there we go.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Just taken as a piece of art, divorced from the context of whether this is how I would choose to instruct people and whatever, divorced from the issues. That's fantastic. That's wonderful cartooning.
I find any extremely innocent tantalization of the Benny Hill era, especially it's considering that because
Especially
of its nature,
it is also
you can
very-
gender
she's-
swap this stuff so
But she's
easy.
literally teaching him important concepts of maintenance. She's actually the smart one in this comic. I'm not going to argue that this is overall an empowering
Oh,
direction of women,
absolutely
but it's
not.
hilarious
But-
and
It's
adorable. adorable.
But
and it's not meant to be. You know,
No.
it's not
Yeah.
trying to be creepy. It's
Yeah.
like
no, it's
embracing the fun of
it's
it.
almost comically juvenile in the best sense.
Yeah.
And again,
The
and
key
I
is really
and
just to give you that
love this
information
kind of,
about storing your antifreeze in 50-gallon drums.
Yeah, it's-
and this
yeah.
is the best possible way to do that.
Hey, boys
But-
over here, we
But
know
it's
you're not that
amazing-
bright. Get
It's
into
amazing that the American government paid to have comic books drawn for them during wartime. Like,
Or I guess, well,
yeah.
during wartime, because it would
Yeah,
have
Korean War.
51 to 71 would have
yeah,
covered.
like
And-
they're like, hey, we're at a war. You know what our soldiers
And
need?
Vietnam.
Comic books that teach them how to do their job.
but it
Like,
literally saves lives.
But
right?
it does, and that's amazing, and
And-
that's like an incredible sort of like acknowledgement of the power of the medium of sequential art.
And he got a lot of flack for writing this during the Vietnam War. Although
not know that.
he definitely was of the opinion of like, I'm not a fan of this war, but I'm a fan of vehicle maintenance while people are in foreign countries.
Yeah, and you
so-
can be
Come
not
on,
a fan
guys.
of a war and still want to keep the people involved in the war alive.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
He definitely he was definitely given a little flack for that, and especially at that time that was definitely there was a heavy line drawn.
Let's see.
Are we gonna talk about Darwin Cook? Or?
We are, just because I'm going to read from.
Please.
Darwin Cook is a really wonderful comic book creator who unfortunately passed away last year, but has
I hear it.
a fantastic style that you might know from DC: The New Frontier, or from his adaptations of the detective books, the Richard Stark Parker series.
He designed the Catwoman
Catwoman
costume that they're
costume,
still
that's
using when he
beautiful.
worked
Beautiful
with
Catwoman
Ed
costume.
Brubaker when they relaunched the book in around 2000, I think it was.
But another thing that he did was from about 2006 to 2008, he wrote a new version of, or not, he may have written it, but he definitely drew it.
I believe he wrote it as well. I'll get behind that one.
Probably wrote and drew, but definitely drew a new iteration of the Spirit comics because his, well, like everyone in comics, he's been influenced by Eisner, but he wears it a little more on his sleeve than a lot of people do. And so there was a website that was running for the Centennial, like rerunning material they had done about Eisner in the past, and there was this lovely quote from Darwin Cook where they basically said, like, what did you learn from Will Eisner? And he said, I think the things I learned are far too numerous and involved for anything less than a book unto itself, but I can certainly touch on what I consider the big picture things Will's work taught me. First, even if your story is about a toy gun or a crying statue, it is a story about character. It's about the human condition. If your readers don't care about your characters, your story will be missing what it needs to fully succeed. Second, every panel is a stage you build custom to reflect the very best way to show the reader what you need them to see and, more importantly, feel. You must be tireless in this regard, and no experiment that communicates story visually should be off the table. Third, Will sort of proved conclusively, at least to me, that there is no school for doing comics that has the full answer. He drew from cinema, literature, real life, theater, and the world's headlines. Whatever worked best for the story. Bring all your resources to the table.
And that last one is especially a important point because if you just have generations of comic people just following what the previous generation did, it's basically just going to be like, you know, Xeroxing, and it's just going to be diluted, and there's not going to be anything new or interesting coming in.
So this is why the awards are named after Eisner.
There's just so much base DNA in what he did. There's actually there's a great image. I just pulled it up, and if we do a Google search, and thank you, Chief, if you're doing this, for Batman and the Spirit, there was a DC book that was Batman and the Spirit when they meet each other, and there's a great cover for that, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about the two
Written by
characters.
Jeff Loeb?
By Jeff and Darwin
Yeah,
were
okay.
co-writers on it, and
Co-writers,
Darwin
nice.
did the art.
This is a face-to-face cover from issue 1.
The only issue, I believe.
Was
of
it a
Batman.
one-shot?
Yeah, it was
Oh.
a Batman Spirit one-shot. There we go.
There we
Yeah.
go.
And that kind of tells you an awful lot about these two characters and how they interact, and how the DNA of one inevitably leads to the DNA of the other.
Well, the Batman slightly predates the Spirit, but they've obviously influenced each other over time.
Very,
Yeah.
very heavily.
I mean, they both come from the same pulp roots, so.
And there was definitely a push for this type of pulp character. And one of the things that people, I guess I'd say people, as if I know, Batman was not the only Batman character. Batman wasn't even only like the Bat-themed character of the time. Like these things would come in these huge waves, and there would only be a few survivors, and everything else sort of gets lost to antiquity. One of the few that recently got brought back was the Black Bat, which was another Bat-themed
Oh, yeah,
crime
yeah.
fighter who I guess they got the rights to because the publishers are long gone, and then
Was
now they.
it Dynamite who
Might have
did
been-
that?
Sounds right.
Well,
Yeah.
it eventually got picked
100%
up, and
on
they
it.
gave it to Cassie Kane, became the Black Bat in DC Universe
Okay,
because
yeah.
they just bought the name of another Batman spin-off, like attempt at the
I don't think I've ever heard someone call Cassandra Cain Cassie Cain.
Cassie
It
Cain.
feels like she would kick you if you did that.
She would kick
Punch
me,
you in
and
the
I would
face.
never know where it came from.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
the
Black
dynamite
Bat,
one. Yeah.
because or it might have hit public domain,
nice.
which is another thing that might
Yeah.
have happened.
Booch did that
So
one.
let me throw this out. Autistic Cosplay asks, "What is pulp?" And Japan Rose asks, "What defines pulp roots?"
Ooh.
That's a broad. Okay.
It's
Yeah,
a very
that's-
broad.
Pulp is named after a type of paper. That's
Yeah,
my favorite
like-
thing about this.
Yes.
It is a
Like,
a
really
genre or mode
cheap.
of storytelling that is named after the way it got delivered to
Mm-hmm.
you.
I just read a very interesting conversation on an RPG thread, actually talking about it was a Call of Cthulhu versus Trail of Cthulhu argument, and it devolved into a defining pulp argument, and no one could define it. Very
like any artistic style, it's kind of a focus point that it's less about a border and more about a distance from a gravitational pull.
Okay.
Uh,
Yep.
It's in the solar system because the sun's exerting gravity on it, and the closer it is to that gravity, the more pulp. Like pulp is the center of gravity. This is a thing about art because people will say like, well, is would you say that this is nouveau or not nouveau? I'm like, well, it's pretty nouveau. There's a lot of gravity. The pulp books were basically any of these books that were published on this type of like really cheap paper at the time.
This is the early 20th century. We're talking a lot like 20s and 30s,
20s, 30s,
especially.
yeah.
And printing has they're finding new and cheaper ways to print things, which means you can sell a lot of copies of something and just sort of turn it out very quickly and get it
Yeah.
into a whole lot of hands.
So
Like one of the Doc Samson was
Doc Samson.
a really big one, right? Like
Doc
the
Savage.
Rock or
Doc
Doc Savage.
Savage, not Samson.
I was like, I know it's not
Marvel-y.
Samson because that's Marvel, but that's the only one I can remember, so I'm just gonna throw it out there.
So big pulp heroes,
Doc Savage.
sort of quickly distilled into a couple of genres, like the sort of adventure genres as headed by Doc Savage, and the sort
Science
of
hero,
crime and noir,
crime noir.
genres as headed by the Shadow.
Shadow.
The original pulp heroes. These were mostly prose stories with very evocative illustrated covers, but you had pulp sci-fi, pulp adventure, pulp crime, like
Pulp
all this
romance.
pulp romance.
They tend to be very broad. They tended to be very operatic. A good modernization of pulp, if you want to see like a great adventure pulp, Indiana Jones was designed to be the pulp hero. Like it's very much kind of a caricature of heroics. Like there tended to be not a lot of nuance to these characters.
Yeah, if you want like a good comic book, I would say that Five Ghosts of Fabian Gray is very much like calling back to sort of like those pulp roots. It's very like mystic and like it's drawn in that way. It's very not minimalistic, but like very colorful and yeah. So,
Early Captain America is very pulpy.
Yeah.
Even stuff like Zorro's essentially
Yeah,
drawn
right,
from the
yeah.
pulps.
Yeah.
Very much. And fun fact, Amy and I have been in a pulp noir RPG for like over 3 years now,
It's
I
really
think.
fun.
Yeah.
Our friend has a homebrew pulp system that's just like every sort of cool 30s trope that's thrown into
That's cool.
a blender.
And he did a cool thing when we were creating our characters that every character had like a novel title, and one of the other characters had guest starred in another character's
This
novel.
was
So
really
that
fun.
was how our
Like,
whole
Oh my
so
God, that
everyone
sounds so
had
that's how we
like
all came together. And what are
ours
we?
was
We're
like
the
South American Adventure, but right? What was
yeah.
it called?
Mine was Grace Mason
Like
and the
African
Purloined
Queen
Pearls
kinda?
of Paris.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And now we're the League of Mystery, and we just messed
So-
up. We just actually changed real world history in our last session. It was a whole thing.
So I guess that
Right.
I'm coming up with the best way I would define pulp is that it is basically all of the tropes that we collected from the 30s and 40s, the pop culture tropes of the 30s and 40s are kind of the pulp era. Very much what pop culture was at that time.
It's a good way to define it,
yeah.
actually.
Certain sections of it, like there was other stuff going on, like
Magicians
little
in tuxedos.
rascals and
Sure.
but there's a
very,
lot
like,
of sort of stuff.
mostly
Film
the
noir,
print.
but on the page.
It was
Yeah,
the
noir.
print pop
noir. Yeah.
Yeah.
at the time. I mean, like because Rascals would never. I mean, although there was a pulp version of that, which was the oh God, what was it? The League, the Adventurers League or something like that. I'm trying to all the kid newspaper.
Newsboy Legion.
Newsboy Legion.
Well, that was just a
yeah.
proper comic. Like
Yeah.
it was, so
There are versions. Again, these things are mushy. It's less about dividing up like a territory and making a border, and more about how much gravitational. Pull
Yeah, I don't think
something
there's
has.
really any genre that has really hard defined
No
borders.
It's always about and you can have a lot of gravity for one, and then a minor amount of gravity for another, which is how you get these weird mixes. And I really dig
Those
that.
are my favorite.
I do want to talk over a couple of these nominees. I'm going to start with a very exciting category. perspectives.
Wait,
I'm
no,
going to
the other way.
locate the one I want.
Paper.
Well,
Paper.
let me throw this question out.
Yeah, while we
This comes from Dan Rodre. Question: other than Faith, what books are you most excited to see nominated this year? Any
Oh my God,
snubs?
so
Damn it, I
many.
was just going straight for Best New Series.
Let's talk about Best New Series.
Yeah. It turns out our printer's double-sided, and I didn't know that.
Also, the
extremely
writers that
convenient.
I am up against in Best New Series is super intimidating.
Honestly, the entire time I've been going to the Eisners, the great thing about them is like whether or not you think like obviously people always get overlooked. There's uncertainties of the process, but everything that is up for Best New Series is worth your time. Like
Yeah.
it's just a blanket. Like this is good stuff, y'all. Check it out.
I'm always more interested by the nominations than by the winner. The winner is trivia. The nominations is a reading list.
The winner's the person I get to hear from. That's the thing I love, where it's like that's when you get the speeches, and that's great. But it doesn't. It's not an objective like decision that this was the best thing in the world. So, Best New Series nominations for 2017 for the Eisner Awards: Black Hammer, published by Dark Horse.
I
by
read the first volume of, and it's excellent.
It's very good.
Jeff Lemire and
Yeah.
Dean Ormston. This has been an absolute like mega hit at our store. This is exactly our alley. Speaking of sort of pulpy roots,
Yeah.
Oh, for sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Super pulpy.
Clean Room by Gail Simone and John Davis Hunt, published by Vertigo DC.
I don't know who this Gail is, but I think she's got a
think
bright
she's gonna be
future.
big.
I think she's gonna do okay. I think she's got a
I
she's
feel
got a
like she's
strong,
really gonna make a mark in comics, guys.
Yeah.
I think she could do okay.
She sounds like she has that kind of name.
This is the sort of book that'll help you pay rent.
For people who don't know, Gail Simone is one of the preeminent female writers in comics, and she actually got her job. I think was Simpsons Comics, I think, or Bongo, where she first
Was
got
that?
her
I don't
start.
know.
But she
know a lot
she
of
sort of
people
came to
started Bongo.
preeminence on the internet doing. I don't remember if it was a specific website or a column, but it was
She
the
was-
women in refrigerators.
Right. She was
Like a
writing a
column
column
to a
that led
website.
to, I think, like the creation of this website, which is it's a foundational thing, I think, for a generation of fans like me, who came to this idea, and she's now like much better known for her body of work than this like late '90s website that represented its moment in time very specifically. But do you want to explain what Women in Refrigerators was?
The specific term came from, I believe it was Kyle Rayner's
Kyle Rayner's
girlfriend,
Green
who was
girlfriend, Green
murdered
Lantern.
and cut into pieces and left in his refrigerator for him to find, and it basically,
In an early '90s comic book story.
And
In,
it's sort
in
of-
a,
it's
in
sort
a
of the-
deeply forgettable book.
yeah, it's sort of the concept of female characters who exist only to be killed to have an emotional impact on the male character who is actually the star of the story.
And
And we don't see that as much these days
Oh,
because
no.
it's like one of the tropes that everyone is hyper aware of now.
So we pay more attention to how we do those things now, and it gets more evenly distributed, I think. But part of how we got there was that, like, at some point, Gail, who was a comic book fan and had been writing this sort of column about comics, and I think, I'm not even sure, like, when she exactly started working professionally, but sort of roughly contemporaneous, started compiling just a list of like the terrible things that had happened to women in the comics that she was
And
reading.
not a nuanced list, but it wasn't meant to be. It was just
It's not an
it was meant
indictment
to
of
be.
every story found on the list, but what is interesting is that when you started to look at a list of all of these, like how many times this person was sexually assaulted, or this person had a terrible alien pregnancy, or this person was depowered, and this person got cancer, and this like
It
when-
got hard to read just due to a difficulty of like focusing on the print. It was just this wall of print,
and it
and that's
was
embarrassing.
It was interesting because it never suggested nor was intended to suggest that bad things haven't happened to male characters. But I think that for most people, an honest reaction to discovering this was to sort of stop and go, wow, this is a pattern that is very
Needs to be
distinct
addressed.
and is something that we should think about when we're making stories. And I think like there were a lot of sort of like Gail lived through some shit storms as a result of like having an idea once.
And she
like-
still is she still is totally comfortable with speaking out online and
And the great thing is, and she writes some vicious no holds barred comics. Clean Room is like a give people nightmares kind of comic.
Yeah.
She,
Oh,
yeah,
she's
every
not
time an issue
afraid of
comes out,
violence
she's
and
like
bad things.
posting
Yeah.
people are like, thanks, I'm never sleeping again.
But she's very outspoken and she's willing to like not pull punches on a bunch of stuff. But like this was, it's one of the most important like documents in modern sort of comic criticism and that we can take a responsible look at the art we're making and the choices that go into it.
And even like and even beyond that conversation, and something that even like the most iffy of the people I know that work in this business had to say, it was if nothing else an indictment of sloppiness, laziness, and just how fucking dull.
Oh wow.
Just how
wow.
dull. And
Electra,
it
the real
was
one.
becoming
Yeah.
it was and it's one of those things that like in bad television where you were just like you were now just there like
Evil,
there was a
dead.
whole process of people,
Oh, poor
especially
Kevin Feige.
thanks oh god no.
There's a lot of
Especially
spoilers
thanks
on
to
this
thanks
page.
to
We
things
should
like
just,
Watchmen.
Power
It was
Girl,
just one of those
paramedically
things
impregnated.
where you're it's the Marilyn Manson effect of, are we just going to start going door to door in like more and more creepy makeup in a desperate attempt to shock people? It's not working anymore. It's dull and it's just kind of grotesque. And I think if it did nothing else, I think that there's a really good argument to be made that website led to better storytelling.
I think there's an unambiguous
Yeah.
And there are good usages of like it's not that you can't kill a girlfriend off to make a.
Tragedy has a place in storytelling,
But
and it always will.
I absolutely knew writers who were like basically would create a character and then basically make a walking cadaver for them to get weird about later, and it's so dumb.
And so if you've ever heard someone say that a character was fridged, that results from the ongoing discussion that so many of us this became such a touch point of this idea that we adopted it into our lexicon of sort of like as if this person has suffered harm in a way solely designed to inspire the more central character's story, and the person that the harm comes to often being female, and this central person usually being male, that person, we will be like, did this person just get fridged? Yeah, she did.
And
I think I forgot to
justified,
mention Kyle Rayner is a Green Lantern.
he's a Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Kyle Rayner is my favorite Green Lantern. I'm a huge Kyle Rayner fan. I read every issue of Kyle Rayner. This website and story was a big deal for me, and just to make the point, for the life of me, I can't remember what this girlfriend looked like or what her name was.
I remember what she looked like in the
was
refrigerator,
except in
'cause
a
I've seen
fucking
that panel.
refrigerator because she was that disposable to the story. It's an embarrassment. It was a bit of. I hate to I'm not going to overdo it, but
We only got 2 entries
I
into our
know.
best
But,
new
but,
series.
but, but also Gail Simone,
Gail.
women who criticize comics and made a writing career out of it. So
Yeah.
awesome.
It turns out she's an awesome writer and a huge asset to comics in many creative ways. Like, it would have been enough if she had given us
yep,
that
there we go.
yeah,
orgasm.
kill it. Yeah, oi gavalt. In the meantime, let's talk about fun violence. Let's hurt people in some fun ways with
So,
with
our
her
third
current
candidate
book.
for best new series, and this is interesting because you don't there's 2 entries on here that are straight up Marvel and DC superhero books, which isn't always the case for best new series. Deathstroke Rebirth, the new run of Deathstroke over at DC, is nominated for best new series, written by Christopher Priest, art by Carlo Pagulian.
Yeah, maybe.
Lion,
I feel yeah.
and others.
can mispronounce.
A lot of the DC books have more than one
Mispronounce my name.
artist because they're every other week.
That's exciting to me because that's not a book I would have read.
What, Deathstroke?
I would have never
No,
picked
I
up. and
agree. When I
and
saw that
I've
on the
picked
list,
it
I was
up
like,
now.
I
Yeah.
have to go
Yep.
read that.
I'm just behind on a lot of my big 2 reading these days. So, but that's one of the things. Like getting an Eisner nomination will cause people to check out books. So just like you said, getting nominated is
I'm
cool
not a,
because it gives
I'm not
your
a
work more.
Deathstroke fan, but now I'm reading this book because I'm
Maybe
going
this
to
is
take
the
a
book
look at
that
it.
will change your mind.
Well, and it's Christopher Priest who did that Black Panther run, which is
yeah.
seminal to that
I was
character.
on a panel with him a year or 2 ago.
Is he a nice man?
He seemed very nice.
Yeah.
My little interaction. with
Panelly,
him.
He's
on a
very
panel.
very panel friendly.
He's
Yeah.
written
Both in-
a pretty renowned, it's collected across 3 volumes if you're looking for Christopher Priest's Black Panther run.
Terrible.
If you're a
I'm
big fan of Black Panther at all, or want to know anything, get excited for the movie or whatever, that's the book I think to
Or
start
Ta-Nehisi
with.
Coates', which is very
Sure.
accessible because it
Sure.
just started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also that.
A year ago. But
Some book called Faith.
we're skipping
Skipping
4 for
Faith.
now, and then we're coming back to it. The 5th one in Best New Series is Mockingbird, a Marvel superhero book, which unfortunately could have been nominated either for Best New or Best Limited because we only got 8 issues of it. But this is one of those, if your book was really good and not enough people were paying attention, it's possible that, a Best New Series Eisner nomination might be the kind of thing that gets people to go back and pick up your trades. It was written by Chelsea Kane and drawn by Kate Nimachik.
I
And
really
Kate actually drew an issue of Faith too. The
Oh.
issue number 9, which is right there on the wall.
Great. That's cool.
It's the only issue that Andrew Dollhouse has not colored because Kate colored her own work.
Oh, nice.
But Andrew Dollhouse has been like a consistent.
So tell us about this Faith book by Jody Perez and Margaret Savage.
I haven't
by
read it.
Valiant.
I don't know. I haven't read it.
Yes, thank you for that Mockingbird cover. This cover.
Yes. This
If
cover.
anyone has extra copies of that shirt, I need it.
Yeah, Chelsea Kane left Twitter for a while. When
This should have been a fun joke, and instead
Yeah.
people made her life.
And that's not
miserable.
even what the original shirt says, because a friend of ours has the shirt, and it actually says, "Ask me about my radical feminist agenda."
So they already
Really?
toned,
They toned
it
it
down,
down, yeah.
and people still freaked out.
As people are wont to
Why,
do.
what
Yeah.
are they freaking out about?
And the thing
I
is, they
don't-
didn't even freak out when it was solicited. They freaked out when it hit shops, and it had already been in the public eye for 2 months at that
Yeah.
point. So
It's so
people
weird.
are
It's
silly.
such a weird thing to freak out over. I don't understand that.
I think mostly it was her choice in soda or cocktail in that picture was really iffy.
And I mean,
feel
that shirt's
I feel
like a
it's
peach
poor
color,
taste
which just
and
isn't
off.
flattering on a lot of people.
Deeply.
You know?
Everything looks good on Mockingbird. Come on.
I
Yeah,
start
well-
to tan. Well, you're gonna pick up arm tan, and that's gonna be weird.
Side note for our audience, you might also really enjoy that Mockingbird book because there's a sequence from that book which was set on the Joko cruise, on the Jonathan Colton cruise, features
Really?
Colin
Yeah.
Storm and the Double Clicks in the background.
Wow.
It's a nerdy,
It's
nerdy
actually,
book.
I gotta say, it's a fun read. It is a
Actually,
very
fun
read.
fact about the Mockingbird book, it actually spun out of a one-shot that was part of the S.H.I.E.L.D. 50th anniversary, and I wrote the Agent May issue for that, and that was my first full issue that I wrote
Did
for...
you really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that was, I'd written Orphan Black before that, but I co-wrote that with the showrunner, so the Agent May issue was my first, like, solo-written issue anywhere.
So it's Jody time. Tell
Yeah,
us about
it's Jody
Faith.
time.
Okay. So Faith, she comes out of Harbingers, which is a book that goes back to the initial incarnation. And let me explain Valiant very briefly.
Yeah.
So Valiant was a big publisher in the 90s that disappeared because they were bought by a comic book, they were bought by a video game company called Acclaim, and then Acclaim went under, so Valiant also went under. So they disappeared for about 15 years, I think it was, something like that.
Right.
The rights were bought up by people who relaunched the publisher in 2012. So they sort of were bringing back all these crazy 90s concepts, but with actual, like, talented creators like Jeff Lemire, who is, another Eisner nominee. And Faith came back when they relaunched Harbinger, and she was part of a teen group called the Renegades, who were psiots, which are basically people with powers. So
We
not-
can think of them like mutants. It's
Yeah,
not
they're like
exactly
yeah, they're
the
not.
same,
Ex-
but
it's
it
not
sort of
exactly a
helps explain
one-on-one
the
because
concept.
psiots actually they have the potential for superpowers, but it has to be specifically activated for them to actually have powers. So Faith, the Harbinger was a very sort of dark, emo book, except for one character, Faith Herbert, who was like a lifelong comic book fan and sci-fi geek, who got superpowers and was just like, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me. This is everything I've ever wanted. Guys, we can save the world. So she was like the only one in this group of like really sad people who was excited, and she gave them all like code names and all this stuff. And eventually that team fell apart, and she sort of joined a group called Unity that you can think of as sort of like the Avengers or Justice League of the Valiant Universe. She was with that group for 5 minutes, went on one mission with them, saw them just decapitating a bunch of people, and was like, nope, I'm out. This isn't for me. And that's where I came in and pitched for her. So this is her first solo series. So it's her first time out on her own. So I set it in LA,
Thank you for that.
which I
Which has
get to
been a
put
We
lot of
so
fun.
discussed
That
many.
is-
last
it's
week
been a lot of
the
fun.
lack of great like West Coast stories. We were talking about the Marvel Universe.
And
at the
House of
time, but-
Secrets actually got a sort of nod in the first issue of the miniseries. So it's basically her, and she's like doing the whole like, I'm a solo hero, so I need an alter ego, and I need a day job in a journalist type industry. So she's essentially working for like a BuzzFeed type company called Zipline, which I'm really proud of that name. It's a
Yeah,
great
it's
name.
really good.
It's a solid name.
So she's sort of like setting up her whole life here, and her secret identity with her coworkers lasts all of 2 issues until someone like comes and tries to shoot up the place looking for her. And so they've actually sort of become that issue number 9 I was talking about is a day in the life where her coworkers are helping her cover up her identity. So it's a lot
I
of
actually
fun.
really like that too. Like when I got to that, I was like, oh no, like they're gonna figure it out. Oh my god, actually that's really amazing to have this entire team of people who know who you are and like are trying to help
Very
you
much like
keep,
the Newsboy Army actually coming
Yeah,
back to that
I
classic
did love,
notion.
like, I hope, do you mind if I spoil the way one of her, like, her coworker's girlfriend she thinks that her coworker, who found out in emergency circumstances her secret identity, she gets the sense that like he's told her secret to his girlfriend, and she's like, that's super not cool.
Who GMs their D&D group.
Yeah.
Or, although
Oh my
I think it's Eminem actually.
The similar but legally distinct
Yes.
role-playing game they were
Monsters
playing.
and Mazes.
Something like
Mazes
that.
and
yeah.
Monsters.
I forget the original name I came up for it was they're like that's actually like a porn magazine in Japan, so you can't use that.
Okay,
name.
I'm so
God for editors.
curious now.
I think it was like Monsters and Mayhem or something. I don't know.
I'm gonna get some
Or it
weird
was like a
ass in
movie.
the Twitters.
I don't
Oh,
know.
boy.
Yeah.
It was a
Oh,
thing.
boy.
Anyway.
So she begins to suspect that her coworker has told his girlfriend her secret identity. She's like, not cool, not cool. Except that like, and spoilers, so stop listening if you don't want to know how that turns out.
Wave our hands again.
But
That'd be
what
great.
I love is that like she eventually finds out that like what is the coworker's girlfriend's name? So sorry.
I don't know names.
No, I'm so sorry. So she is
Well,
basically
what
like a cosplayer. She does custom cosplay builds for people. And so essentially she's just like, I'm working on a commission of your costume. So like I've studied photographs of you because I like, and this is it's a wonderful detail drawn from life because like
Clara. I found it before I pulled up the
Thank
script.
you. Clara, it's a wonderful testament to sort of like the eye of the cosplayers where it's like, yeah, those would be the people who would figure it out first.
Yeah, and the
Because
idea is,
they're
like-
staring at like, they know
Oh.
what the edge of your ear looks like.
But also
because
just
they're
like
trying to figure out your damn domino.
cosplayers are really used to recognizing each other in costume and with masks and wigs and everything. So it's just like a skill. I just thought that would be a fun, like you couldn't hide your identity from a cosplayer. They're gonna,
They
especially
know
like
exactly how to make themselves look like you, which means they know how you made yourself look like you or not look like you.
yeah. So and I have to talk about Chris Criswell because the book that got nominated
We're good now. We're good.
was the ongoing series, which spun out of the mini series that we
So
initially
yeah, they
did.
gave it was a 4-parter at first, and then it was a sensation because it's great and you're great, and they were like, please do more of these.
And
That's how that happened,
fun
right?
fact, it might have the miniseries might have expanded into the ongoing, except I had an emergency move right around the time I was supposed to be pitching, so it took like 2 months to actually send them the pitch for the ongoing, so that's possibly why. I mean, they still might have done a new number one, but I kind of feel like that might be my fault and not like comic book marketing. But so the one reason I really wanted to do an ongoing was in the mini series. There's all these pages that Marguerite Sauvage does. She does these 3 fantasy pages per issue, and a lot of them are like her daydreams
They're
and her
great. They're super
actual
fun.
dreams, and it's just fun coming up with like nonsense for Marguerite to draw because she makes everything beautiful. But there was this running joke that there's this superhero actor named Chris
Yeah.
that Faith is like a big fan of, and he was just supposed to be an amalgam of every superhero actor named Chris. And in fact, by the second issue, we decided his last name was Criswell. So he's
Criswell.
Criswell.
Chris Criswell.
And around the time I was writing the second issue of the miniseries, I was like, what if Chris Criswell's actually a supervillain? And what if Chris Criswell's like her Lex Luthor?
More spoilers for Faith, but
Yeah,
it's
so-
so good, y'all.
So Chris Criswell is essentially like the kid who grew up and read comics, and just unlike Faith, who was inspired by all the heroes she read, he was inspired by all the supervillains.
I know that kid.
So and there's a
You were that.
Yeah.
No, I mean like I'm I'm Anarchy from Batman. I'm okay.
and I think there's a line there's a line where he's like, I decided to combine my love of supervillains and community theater, and he moves to Hollywood to become like an actor and play supervillains in the burgeoning superhero movie industry. But because of his all-American good looks, he always gets cast as the hero, and he gets so angry at this, he turns his like millions of dollars that he's made as an A-list actor and he funds a criminal empire and basically becomes Lex Luthor, but in Hollywood.
I like, by the way, that Saturday Night Live has just this week touched on this by having the how to tell the different Chris's. In
yes,
the movies apart.
I did retweet that. So, but yeah, Chris Criswell's maybe is among my favorite, probably my top 2 favorite villains that I've ever written.
So, what I love about this is that, like, those of y'all unfamiliar with Jody's other work, Jody, much like Gail Simone, is capable of, like...
Can I talk about the text you sent me? When the
Yes.
first issue of Faith came out, that Tuesday night when Amy was like,
Supposed
doing
to
the
be
pull
pulling
list,
comics and reading
she sends me a
instead.
text and says, Jody, I don't know if you actually wrote this. It didn't make me cry. because for a previous short story I'd written for Vertigo, she sent me a picture of herself after she read it, and her face was all red because she was crying, and she was like, "I hate you."
Yeah, read the Vertigo CMYK anthology featuring a short story by Jody, which is just.
To be fair, I was sobbing the entire time I wrote that story because I was working out on my feelings of my grandmother passing away. But
It was.
Faith
it's a
Issue 1 made
really
me cry
special-
because I've always dreamed of flying over the 405 at 9 o'clock.
yes,
Like that first shot, I'm like, that's
beautiful.
What I
It
like
is
though is that
beautiful,
like
yes.
you write darkness very well. You write sort of viciousness very well, but you have also written this essentially like I love Faith because she is sunny, not stupid. Like she's not naive, or she has tragedy built into her backstory, like all great superheroes.
her story is like a lot of her fandom comes from her parents, and there's hints and harbinger of like her going to Trek conventions with her parents, and like all of her comic collection that she has is her parents' comics. Like they left her long boxes of comics, but they passed away in a car accident when she was a kid, and she was raised by her grandmother. So it's like she's had back during the run on Harbingers, one of her teammates who was her good friend like died horribly. So and she does have these like tragic, horrible things in her past, which I did touch upon in the book because they are sort of weaponized against her at one point. But through that, she remains optimistic. She's like, it doesn't matter. I still have powers. I can still help people. I can make the world a better place, and I really and truly have to keep believing that. And I just like writing a character who is more optimistic than I am, I think.
It's similar a lot to what Joss Whedon has said about like his writing, where he's sort of like, I write people with the hope I wish I had. Like sometimes.
And I tend to be more optimistic than some of the characters I write, I think, because I like being able to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
But yeah, Faith is like the type of person that as I'm writing her, I'm like, I want to be friends with her. She's so much better than me.
So Faith is an amazing character in all of the ways we've just discussed, but a thing that we haven't even brought up yet is that Faith's character design sets her apart from the vast majority of characters.
And that's
heroes
exactly
we've
what
ever
she's
seen.
looked like since 1992.
and it's amazing in comic books. Occasionally, you'll stare at something and go, "How has no one done this? And why haven't I heard about it? And how? My God, it's a breath of fresh air." And it's one of the things I like about the medium is that there's so many places to go that haven't really been even in occasionally in some of the more constraining sections of the genre, that there's something new to find. And it's such a fun story, and I'm really.
And I tend not to talk about that so much because it's not something that comes up really in the writing. That's entirely like on the artist. So I tend to get praise for things that I think like 100% belong to the artist because they're the ones who draw her like so beautifully and with such respect. And one of my favorite things that Marguerite does is even in her fantasies, she looks exactly the way she looks. She doesn't she doesn't have an idealized version of herself.
Her hair is great.
Yeah, her hair is
Her
great.
hair is ideal.
And she's such a brilliant caricature, and I use that in a good way of so many of the women that I knew in the fandom growing up, and that's kind of where it comes from for me is that kind of just post Sailor Moon fandom that hit the United States, and she's such a good icon of a lot of those women who I met at the conventions and who were of that late 80s, early 90s sci-fi and anime.
Yeah, and she's
fandom.
definitely because like in the book she's around 20, so she's like a little bit later to fandom than all of us just by virtue of being younger.
But because she gets a lot of her references from her parents, she's
Yeah,
one of those
and it's weird because I'm sort of in the middle of like what her parents would have liked and what she liked, so it's always sort of fun to go back and forth with like, is this a reference she would know? Like, and pretty much all of her references are just me. The only things I've really had to look up are some of the Trek stuff because I like Trek, but I don't have a super deep knowledge of it. And there was one point I had to look up like. I think it was the third issue of the miniseries. She just has a string of sci-fi profanity that she keeps uttering because that's when her identity is revealed.
Egghead. It's great.
Oh, she uses that one a
Smeghead.
lot. But I had Frack and Fumets and
Gorham.
Yeah, Gorham. And is it Frel, the Farscape one?
Frel.
Yeah. But I was like, I need another one. And I was like, has there ever been profanity in Trek? And I looked up and there was like one word that was in a novel. And I was like, she would have read that. That's fine.
My mom
that
was
reference.
the big Trek head in my family too. She was like, knows way more about that. And it's interesting how the fandoms, the descent of fandoms through family is always such another fascinating. It's. I'm happy with it also because there's not a lot of like that weird. I try and call it proactive positivity is the vibe I get. It's the difference between I call it, in my head, it's the difference between why I don't like Pollyanna as a character, but I like Pippi Longstocking as a character. I have a serious pro Pippi Longstocking, by the way. Like, that's
By the way,
big thing.
if you've not read the original Pippi Longstocking,
Oh my God.
I didn't know were a thing.
I haven't read them. Yeah.
They're amazing. She's just this little anarchist. She's like, the cops are trying to
I've
make her
heard
go
that,
to school,
yeah.
and she's like, don't feel like it. I can lift a horse over my head.
No, and
Like-
she's a super powered pirate. That
It's
is
great.
literally. I mean, like,
delightful.
it's
And
so
she's
nuts.
like 8.
Yep,
10?
she
Yeah.
Like,
lives in a
she's-
house by herself and invites animals to come live with her, and it's the best. It's the best.
Yeah, no, it's like a 19th century tank girl. It's so intense.
adorable.
I love it. So I love
It's
Pippi.
not. She's not anarchic in a mean way. She doesn't kill the cops. She's just like.
She's positively anarchist.
yeah,
she's
she
a very
doesn't want to go to
plucky
school.
anarchist.
So,
Yeah.
or at some point she gets interested in school and then like goes and
She's like, well, that was awful. Yeah.
She's just like tries it out. She's like, this seems fun, and she's like, oh, we have to be here. Never mind.
Never mind.
Anyway. Pippi
But yeah,
Longstocking.
but very much in that same sense of the proactive positivity and allowing that it takes it some again in places that we haven't been in a while if we've been at all, and I've been really
And just because it's me, I like seeing how far I can go into the dark with a character like Faith. But you don't want to you don't want her to find
Thank
her
you for the
boyfriend
Pippi.
cut up in the refrigerator or something.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain level, there's certain things you
well
can,
that wouldn't be a Faith story.
yeah, it wouldn't be a Faith story. But I've done some pretty dark stuff with
So,
her.
hey.
Speaking of
Boom!
Speaking
Speaking of
of
dark stuff, since we're
Dark stuff Jody's capable of. Tell us about some of your other work. These are some issues of Mother Panic.
So
You're
Mother,
like you,
yeah.
and you're okay. To understand, it would be awesome for anyone, I think, who got to write a young animal book and add a piece to the Gotham mythos. But like, it's you. It's special. Tell our audience a little bit about what you love about comics or what got you into them.
That's a really long
I know.
story.
I'm
trying
taking a few
to
back
sum
because
up
we talked
in
about
relevant.
a lot of
Okay,
stuff.
so I was into superheroes from a very young age, but what got me reading comics was Batman the Animated Series because I started picking up the Batman Adventures comics. So yes, and that's like really this whole generation of comic creators I think owes like Batman the Animated Series and the X-Men Animated Series for their interest in comic books. So yeah, and the book that I read consistently, from the time I first started buying comics, like around '93, was Catwoman. So that's the one character I've followed forever. So now I'm getting to write a even more badass woman in Gotham, I guess.
It's a good suit. A good name.
Tell us a little about Mother Panic.
Yeah.
Basically, Mother Panic is the complete opposite of Faith, except the only thing they have in common is they are both female characters who have white costumes, which and as someone who never wears white, I find both of them kind of ridiculous in that sense. Because
So-
it's like, why would you run around a city and do action stuff while wearing white? That just seems like a poor choice.
I will say I love the Moon Knight answer to that.
Yeah.
Which is,
I want them to see me
see me
coming.
coming. And I'm like, oh!
Yeah.
I want them to see me coming into the fray.
So Violet Page is a sort of celebutante. She's the type of person that's always like would be on TMZ for punching a paparazzi again, or there are rumors that she got out of rehab again. And she actually, no one knows she's running around Gotham at night in this amazing design costume by Tommy Lee Edwards. And she's essentially seeking revenge for the wrongs of her youth. She went to a school named Gather House that we're dropping little bits of info about, and now is a cybernetically enhanced, really pissed off woman. And it's sort of like, what if the divide between Batman and Bruce Wayne wasn't really there? Like, Bruce Wayne goes to parties and pretends to drink champagne, but it's really apple juice, and like Violet goes to parties and is doing shots, and they are actual alcohol. And she has like some substance abuse issues, but her main addiction is continuing to improve her cybernetic enhancements that give her super strength. So
It's the book that I was reading before I knew that you were writing it. So that's the
and
like,
my favorite thing, because the first interview I did about Mother Panic, they asked me a question I was not prepared to answer, which is like, what really sets her apart from Batman? And the first thing that came into my head, and it's true, is she's not an orphan. And there's a whole thing. Her mother is one of the main people in her life, and her mother is dealing with mental health issues, which are. We're going to touch on that a little bit more, but essentially sort of like an early onset degenerative brain issue, like an Alzheimer's type thing. And so she's like caring for her mother and just that whole relationship with her mother is one of like the softer sides we see of her to an extent. And Rebecca Page is like my favorite character in the book because she speaks fairy tale. Violet's headquarters is essentially an abandoned hotel that she's taken over and retrofitted for her purposes, and her mother lives in like these two suites that are like 2 stories that have been gutted and turned into an enchanted forest.
That's
So quickly,
spectacular.
other stuff that people would enjoy of yours. You've worked on a number of adaptations and sort of like getting to, well, before you got to Rogue One even, you were the first comic book writer to put their stamp on Orphan Black.
Yes, I co-wrote Orphan Black, the initial miniseries with the showrunners, and that was my first like book that I did. The Agent May issue, which I think was just called The Cavalry, which
Nice.
is great
Remember that.
because she hates that name. And then
I
I did.
love that storyline in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. too, like why she hates that name, the tragedy that comes from it. And
They asked me to write the issue the same week that that episode aired, and I get like the emails like, I'm not sure if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but there's this character, Agent Melinda May, and my reply was like I'm gonna say no to writing this after that episode. Holy crap!
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, that was
Oh yeah, that was a really fun reveal of where that name
Yeah.
came from,
Yeah.
why she hated it, and what they've done with it this season. Like the show has its flaws, but like there's some things.
This
I'm behind on all
this
TV
season
now.
is just rocking my world.
Yeah, this season's been
just
a lot
rocking
of fun. Like
my
And then
this
you worked
season.
on the Max Ride comics.
Yeah, where I did
No, bring us back.
volumes 2 and 3 of Max Ride. Margaret Bennett wrote the first volume, but then she was writing 17 other comics, so she had to step aside. Rogue One.
2 issues out so far of that one.
I'm trying to think.
Oh, thank you for the Melinda May badass video playing. Over
Yeah,
this,
I'm trying to think. What else do I write?
she retweeted your comic, right?
Yes,
Like,
I ran into her at San Diego, and I took a photo with her, and she was so delighted to meet me
Ming-Na
because
Wen,
we
the wonderful
talked
actress who
on
plays her.
Twitter, and it was very nice.
I've heard that she's like one of the nicest, most talkative people ever, and is the exact opposite of her character.
She's
in
super
S.H.I.E.L.D.
nice and delightful, and she had to run because she was like going to prep for like a award event thingy, but she took the time to chat with me for a second and do a photo where we look like we're the same age.
Because she's a magical, unchanging being.
Yes.
Like,
And-
There's a
Ming-Na
portrait,
Wen.
there's a portrait in an attic
X-Files
somewhere.
Origins, which I co-write.
Yes!
Yeah.
It's the adventures of Baby Scully and Baby, I almost said Sculder. Baby Scully and Baby Mulder. I write the Mulder side, like having their like Stranger Things-esque adventures in the 70s over summer break. Just announced is Rise of Atriox Halo that I'm writing an
Yes.
issue of.
What is that? I don't know
It's,
that.
It's the
Halo
new villain
game.
from Halo Wars 2. So
Gotcha,
we're doing
gotcha,
there's a
okay.
mini series that's like sort of his origin story.
That's
So I basically
awesome.
got to write the aliens of the Covenant, and I think the only line from a human is like, "No, please," as he's getting brutally killed. So
And
it's,
so
just this
cool.
past weekend for Free Comic Book Day.
oh yes, Attack on Titan. I got to write for Kodansha, the Free Comic Book Day issue, which I think was called Truth, and it's sort of the story of the role that art plays in a post-apocalyptic society, where
God.
where you can get eaten by giants, and your brother might get eaten by giants because he goes outside the wall. And
That's
it's
awesome.
yes, and I know at least one friend of mine cried over it, so my job is done.
Jody feeds on our tears.
Yes,
That's the thing.
I feed on everyone's tears. They give
But
me
she
strength.
makes these wonderful stories out of them, so we're all willing victims. It's like it's been really fun to have known Jody all this time because, like, the same way she was calling me internet superstar before I ever did anything. Like,
Oh,
I've been bragging about knowing Jody from like moment one because it was always obvious
I
that
have to-
someday I would be
yes, oh,
talking
yes.
about Eisner-nominated Jody Hauser.
Well,
like, we all knew.
I have to tell the womanthology story.
Oh yes.
Because my first published work was in a book called Womanthology that was a big Kickstarter project that IDW put out, and I worked with 2 artists on that, one of whom is Fiona Staples. And
Oh my God.
This is pretty
Womanthology
solid.
actually came out. There was actually a delay in the release of Womanthology for shipping, whatever. So it ended up coming out the same day as Saga #1. And so I'm in the store picking up my comics, and Amy is like, "Oh, so there's 2 writers out who have Fiona Staples drawn stories out today. You and some brand came on, guy." And that's when I'm like,
Oh my God.
and that's when I'm like, "Yes, I'm
Oh my
shopping here
God.
forever. This is my store forever." So good
my
job,
God.
Amy.
Solid.
You've already been shopping there for like 5 years at that point, but I'm glad we
Yeah.
finally won you over.
Yes.
Solid.
Well, and also the store's been super supportive of like everything I've worked on, and you guys always order stuff. Like
We
maybe
would
more, hopefully not more
10
copies than
kinds
you
of
should,
foolish, not
We
to.
have a plethora of good stores
Yeah.
in LA, and it's amazing
We
that it's
do.
hard to
Very
pick. It's
lucky.
hard
Yeah.
to pick, although you are conveniently located at the studio. Which
We
is
got your
Yeah.
phonogram hardcover in. Sorry.
Okay, coming
Your
in.
what? Your what? What'd you say?
I got my phonogram hardcover in. I'll be
nice.
stopping by today then. That'll
Yeah.
be fine.
So we
oh,
will
there we
spend
go.
more time with these.
yeah, there's a
nominations.
woman
Yes,
anthology, and there
that's
is,
beautiful.
yeah, I love that cover. They just put like little snippets of.
One of my favorite
from-
things was
yeah.
that this came from like a tweet by Renee DeLiz. And when they eventually put together the beautiful hardcover that collected all of the work under Womanthology, which is all
over
short
400
stories.
pages, I believe.
Yeah, an enormous anthology of work by, like they said, over 150 different women, writers and artists and letterers and colorists, all collaborating together. The way they present this hardcover, when you open the front cover, what you see is literally a picture of Renee DeLiz's tweet, and then spiraling out from it, all of the responses as they came pouring in when she said, would anyone want to do a project like this?
Yeah, the
Wow.
question was essentially, do any women want to contribute to a comic anthology for charity? That was basically it. And she got 100 responses the first day, over 100. I was one of them. And yeah, it just blew up into this huge
They started a
thing.
crowdfunding campaign, which went wildly
And it was
over
like
their goals.
we had like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Kevin Smith and Gail Simone, who was also a contributor to the book. My story is actually next to Gail Simone's in the book.
Those folks donated rewards to
Yes,
encourage people
yeah,
to...
and promoted it on social media, and we blew past. I think we blew past the initial ask in 19 hours, and it ended up raising more than 4 times what it ended up being, like over 100,000. And at the time, and it's that record's gone, but at the time it was the most successfully funded comic book Kickstarter.
This was like circa 2011?
2011, yeah.
Really
And the book came
excellent.
out in from the tweet being posted to the book hitting stores was, I believe, 10 months.
Wow.
And that was
Which
with
is
150 contributors,
Wow.
I believe. It's insane. Like,
And part of the idea was that like there's a constant frustration that like sort of people don't, when they picture comic book creators, they don't tend to picture women. They don't. And part of it was like there's a ton of people out there who could be doing this great work, and that's why one of my favorite things is not only that that you were in there, but like that folks like Fiona, who had been working already, but was so far from a household name at that point. And then it was just like there are so many talented people out there working that the anthology would come out the same day her like now history making run on Saga began is so amazing. to
and
me.
the cool thing is, like, people like Fiona and Gail, who were already established professionals,
Yeah,
they
she'd
wanted
already worked. She
yeah,
just
they
wasn't
wanted
like
to pair all of those people with new creators. So basically, if you wanted to work with one of the professional writers, you submitted an art portfolio, and if you wanted to work with one of the professional artists, you submitted your pitch. So I actually worked with Fiona because she picked my pitch, which is super cool.
So cool.
And
Yeah,
then
I went and got her to sign a thing for me the year before that came out. She was already a big deal. It's just like comic book big deal levels are.
And I have to give
Very,
a shout out
very
to Adriana
random.
Blake, who is the other artist on the story. And they basically were like, so Fiona's drawing this new ongoing series, which of course was Saga, and she can only draw half of the story, so pick another artist to work with her. And I'm like, wait, I have to pick an artist to work alongside the professional for what's going to be my first published. Okay, that's not. And they gave me a list alphabetical of who was left, and Adriana Blake was at the top of the list. And I was like, wait, she's perfect. It can't be that easy. So I looked at everyone else, and it was Adriana. So because I needed someone who could do multiple styles, because I think it's a 6-page story that takes place over 3 time periods with 3 art styles. Because I'm
Wow.
that.
Never let it be said
Jerk.
you're not ambitious.
Yeah, I outlined it in a spreadsheet.
That's amazing. So we're running out of time,
We
unfortunately,
are.
but I wanted to say a huge thank you for being here.
I would just want to say, Artistic Cosplay, we got your letter, and I will say that there will be at the very least a autistic characters in comic books episode, and we will be working on it, and it will be a thing. So.
But I want to show off
Yes,
this beautiful, I saved it for stream. We don't have time to do proper letters columns, but this is the,
I
oh
love
God,
anything
you're-
Slytherin. Yeah, I know you just did that.
Oh no, I hope that was blurry.
Yeah.
You sent us a really beautiful letter.
We'll blur it in the post at the very least.
Wow, I don't think things through. You put a wonderful seal on your letter.
Yeah.
Thank
put
you
it
for
on
that.
the-
Well,
I love the internet.
Yay!
I'm
Thank you,
really,
Chief.
really sorry, and I will be more careful in future. I don't get a lot of physical mail. How does this work?
I'll show you next time.
there's an
I forgot
envelope
to be
and
a
you
guardian,
put
so.
things in it.
Yeah.
And
That's why I usually open it beforehand. Just
Well, it said on stream, so I
know. I'll show you the.
It has a beautiful seal on it.
It's really
as someone who has a
filigree
bag
seal
of
on
mail from the other show right now that I'm currently going through, I'll show you how we do it.
Right.
That's the process.
Thank you very much
Hi.
for writing in. We love having you watch the show.
But yes, other than that, do we have any other questions? Since we have 1 minute, let's pick a question.
From Frankenstein
I'm the worst. I'm so
1912,
sorry.
Jody, which character or universe would you most like to write?
I think I already said Catwoman, sort of like my
Catwoman.
dream character. I would love to see her pop up in Mother Panic, just because they do have a lot of similarities, but they're complete opposites in other ways. So it would just be really fun to play with that contrast there.
Anybody decent? Yeah. bug
I'm
Whitney
already
about
writing
that.
Star Wars. So, Doctor Who. I would love to write Doctor Who for Titan.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
There's a couple issues with that book.
Actually,
folks who
I would love a Faith Doctor Who crossover, which is
That would be amazing.
not entirely
So-
unlike the event I'm writing for the summer, Faith in the Future Force. So check that out, 4-issue miniseries starting.
I mean, could you create your own Time Lord who is very Doctor Who?
Well, we actually
like?
there are already time traveling characters in the Valiant universe, spun out of a book, Ivar Time Walker, and Neela, who is one of the main characters of that book, is essentially teaming up with Faith and Faith in the
you
Future
can
Force.
kinda do
And
what
Neela
Power
hates
does.
Doctor Who.
Who does?
Neela hates Doctor Who. That is canon from Ivar. So I say the summer event is the team up of a Doctor Who fan and someone who hates Doctor Who. A time traveler. I think it's not so much that she hates Doctor Who, it's just as a time traveler, she gets lots of comparisons to Doctor Who and it's scientifically inaccurate. And she's a scientist and people are getting the wrong idea. And I could see how that would be frustrating.
So let me throw out this question from Jap and Rose. Do you think it's ever possible to have an Eisner's only pass for SDCC?
If you get a Friday only pass, that's the closest you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Yeah, is find the day that it's on. It's probably on Friday because I think that's when it typically is. If you just get that one day pass, and I think the day passes are only like $70 or something like that.
They do sell out quickly.
They
of
sell out
course.
quickly.
The first year I
But-
went to San Diego, the 4-day pass was $65. And I was eligible for a pro badge and didn't know it.
Yeah.
And I bought my pass 3 weeks before the convention started.
That
So,
used to be a
I
thing you
wouldn't
could
even know
do.
how to get a normal badge anymore. It's been so long.
Yeah, look online into day passes and see if there's any Friday left, and if there is, get that, and then you can go to the Eisners that night.
And
Yeah, I guess it, like, I could see an argument for saying, like, selling special Eisner's only passes, considering it doesn't tend to fill up.
Yeah, if
but,
like you're a nominee and you want to bring like your, your spouse or your kids or something
Yeah.
with you, and they
probably
might not.
provisions for that.
Yeah, probably. but-
we should look into whether or not there is such a thing as an Eisner ticket.
Because I think it was
Yeah.
never necessary in the old days because anyone, like, until 10 years ago, anyone who wanted
to go
could get,
could go,
like,
yeah.
there wasn't a lack of badges. So, interesting thought for Comic-Con. Have
Yeah.
you considered an Eisner's only ticket?
Also, are the Eisners live streamed? Does anyone know? Because my mom was asking.
They hadn't
were
been
last year.
Okay.
Until last year, I think.
I think last year was the first time they were, and you had to have a CCHQ subscription to watch
Okay.
it.
Which you can get. Do they still do the free week? If you
think so.
You can get a free week of it
We
if
don't
you
know
have
the
an Amazon
status.
Prime
I will
account.
look into
This
that
year,
and
though.
tell my parents.
Yeah.
We will actually figure this out because we're going to do another Eisner's episode. Probably not next week, but we'll probably like space them
We'd
out.
like to revisit, since we barely got into this year's nominations, we want to spend some time every so often coming back to check out like a new category of what's
From now
on
until
it.
Comic-Con, yeah.
Yeah.
Weekly Eisner talk.
Asness.
We
What
get
do we want
excited
to talk
about
about
great
next week? Do we
comics.
know yet?
I've got some theories, but I figure we can have that talk offline since there's only a minute more of
secret.
offline.
Yeah.
We'll announce it, but there may be something a little fanciful. I don't know. Maybe we'll get fanciful.
Anything we want to plug? I would like to say, for anyone who isn't already watching Jody's brilliant performing abilities, on Fridays, Eric's TBD RPG, and on Mondays on Vast. Thank
Where I'm
God-
mostly just harassing Amy.
You're, well, on Vast, you're like, thank God, there to help us all not die. Good job with that tank the other
Never using non-lethal force ever again. Just saying.
You can
Look,
see,
because
Sorry.
it backfired once.
you can
Yeah.
see all three of us on Eric's TBD.
Yeah.
Yes.
I figured they knew that. Sorry.
Well, I mean,
I'm-
they
I'm
may
not.
not.
Well, you're just Doctor Strange.
And you're
I'm just Doctor-
Doctor
Strange.
You know,
We are
and they're
Doctor
keeping
Strange
you busy
and the
working
Time
on the
Lords.
signal boosts.
Yeah, I am signal boosting it.
You're boosting all the signals.
We've got some really fun ones that we're recording this Saturday.
Nice.
Excellent.
One of my favorite sketches that I've ever written will be this Saturday.
Yay.
Very excited about it. And
I still was shocked that you made Amy be so mean to you on her signal.
it was really funny because she's so nice. I like playing against type. It's always funny.
Yeah, it was fun.
She's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my
We-
life. So
Yeah,
it makes sense
that
to
is
do that.
accurate.
we are getting the wrap it up. So
All
To wrap
right.
it up.
I'm Amy Dallen. You can find me at Enthusi Amy.
I'm Taliesin Jaffe. You can find me at Executive Goth.
I'm Jody Hauser. You can find me on Twitter at Jody_Hauser.
And I'm Matt Key at the Matt Key on Twitter.
And this has been
The Wednesday Club.
Thanks so much.
Bye.